Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a time when survival wasn't about checking the weather app. It was about praying your toes didn't fall off overnight. You're in a medieval village now and the sky is already dimming before dinner. It's winter. Real winter. No modern heating, no fleece blankets from the discount aisle, no insulated boots or hot cocoa waiting for you. Just stone, fire and hope. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm not gonna guilt trip you. I'll just be here talking to myself while you shiver in your peasant tunic. By the way, what city are you watching from and what time is it where you are? Let me know in the comments. I'll try not to freeze while I wait. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's nearly dusk. The sun sinks so early it feels like a prank. You're standing just outside your family's cottage, tugging your hood down tighter, breath curling like smoke in the frigid air. The goats have been herded in, the chickens cluck in confusion at the darkness, and already your nose is going numb. You duck inside quickly, stomping your feet to shake off the frost that's already started to cling to your soles. The door shuts with a thud, and you lean back against it, your last line of defence against the wind. The house smells like smoke, sweat, and boiled turnip stew. It's not charming, but you're used to it. A few candles sputter in clay holders, casting strange shadows along the uneven walls. Smoke lingers just under the thatched ceiling, curling like lazy snakes. You've come home from the field, or the forest, or wherever the work took you today, and every muscle feels heavy. But even heavier is the weight of knowing that night is going to be long, cold and loud, with wind and snoring and probably the occasional rat squeak. Your whole family is here. That's normal. You live with everyone. Siblings, parents, maybe a grandparent or two, a cousin who won't leave, and a baby that won't stop crying. There's not really such a thing as personal space. In the medieval world, family isn't just love and lineage, it's insulation. You pack together like spoons in a drawer. Not because you like each other that much, but because body heat is free. As you glance around, someone is already feeding the fire, coaxing the last light out of the embers from earlier. That hearth isn't just decorative, it's survival. Without it, this house becomes a stone freezer. But firewood is precious. You can't just keep a blaze roaring all night. No, you'll light it in the evening, cook over it, bask for a few fleeting hours, then let it die down until morning. Hopefully the coals survive the night. Hopefully. It's time to bed down, even though it feels like the afternoon. That's winter life. When it's dark, you rest. There's no Netflix to push through the evening slump. You peel off your outer layers slowly, revealing a thick wool tunic underneath. Your nightwear by default. It itches like a curse, but it's better than frostbite. Underneath, you've got a linen shirt. Threadbare, but better than nothing. Your hands are already chapped and raw. There's no lotion. There's lard if you're lucky. In the corner, the bed, if you can call it that, awaits. A wooden frame creaking and low to the ground. Ropes crossed beneath a lumpy sack stuffed with straw. Maybe some feathers if you're rich or lucky, or both. There's a blanket made of scratchy wool woven years ago, patched and mended too many times to count. And yes, you're sharing it. With at least 2 other people, sometimes more. You crawl under it like you're diving into a trench. It's instantly warmer but not comfortable. Someone's feet are ice against your thigh. You groan. They groan back. Another sibling flops down beside you, stealing more than their share of the cover. You sigh. Another normal night. The wind howls outside, slipping through every crack in the timber. It creeps across the floor like a ghost. You wrap your arms around yourself tighter. Somewhere above, you hear a drip of condensation hitting the cold clay floor. Or maybe that was something else. It doesn't matter. You're too tired to check. People often think medieval winters meant instant hypothermia, but that's not how it worked. You adapted. You layered. You shared. You shut everything up tight, stuffed cloth around the windows, banked the fire, and slept like you were in hibernation. Every movement is energy you can't afford to waste. You curl in tighter, pressing back to back with your cousin, ignoring their snoring and the faint odour of fermented cabbage. The cold is brutal, yes, but manageable. You know where the worst drafts hit. You've lived through this before. You keep your feet wrapped in old rags, wear a cap to bed because heat escapes through your head. Yes, they knew that too, and pray for a short winter. And as your eyelids grow heavy, the fire now a dim orange glow, you hear the night truly settle. No more creaking boards, just breathing, some muffled sleep talking, and that distant wind. Somewhere not far off, a wolf cries into the void. You pull the blanket higher and let sleep take you, inch by inch, knowing full well that this is only night one of many. Fun historical fact, sunset in medieval Europe often hit by 4 p.m. in winter, making nights long, dark and mentally grueling. Quirky fringe fact, some medieval folks believed that sleeping with an onion near your head could draw out illness during cold months. You're welcome. Debate spotlight. Scholars still debate how much the two-sleep system, first asleep, midnight waking, second sleep, was universally practiced versus limited to certain regions or classes. You wake before dawn not because you're ready to, but because the cold has reached your bones. It's a slow, creeping chill that slips through the blanket, past the wool layers, past the straw mattress. Your back is damp where it touched the edge of the bed frame. Someone shifted in the night and left part of the cover tugged off your shoulders. You try to pull it back without waking them, but they grunt, shift again, and the cover slides back down. Fantastic. Your house is barely a house by modern standards. It's a single-room structure made of rough stone and wood beams, capped by a thatched roof. The walls are thick, uneven and cold to the touch, even colder now that winter's in full swing. There's no insulation as you know it. No fiberglass tucked into cavities, no sealed windows to keep out the chill. Instead you've got straw packed into the floor, some cloth hung around the wall joints, and maybe, if you're lucky, an old sheepskin nailed across the worst drafts. And drafts are everywhere. You hear the wind whistle through a warped slat near the ceiling. The thatch above groans in protest as frost builds up, threatening to break through. You think about the loft. Some houses have them. A little wooden platform near the roof to sleep on where heat rises. But not this place. Here, you're ground level. The cold sinks and settles like a cat at your feet. Someone stirs near the hearth. It's always someone's job to wake first. Maybe it's your mother. Maybe it's your older brother. Whoever it is, they're moving slow, bundled in everything they own, trying to coax the coals back to life without using too much wood. You see a flicker of orange light, brief and shy. They blow gently into the embers. You hear a crackle, then the sharp sound of a twig catching fire. Heat, finally. But it takes time. The warmth from the fire barely reaches you unless you're right next to it. The cottage is too big to heat with just one hearth, and too small to move far enough away from the smoke. So you lie there, watching your breath fog the air. You press your fingertips together, numb, stiff, and flex them slowly. If you don't move, you'll ache. If you move too fast, you'll ache differently. You shift and sit up. The straw under you crackles. Dust drifts up in tiny golden motes, catching the weak morning light seeping in through a crack in the shutters. You shake off your cloak and toss it over your shoulders like a tent. It doesn't help much. You wish you were still in bed, tangled up with the others, but your spot's already been taken. Everyone plays this game, musical sleeping positions, where the one who gets up first forfeits their warm place forever. Your feet hit the floor, cold, sharp. You don't cry out, but you feel every splinter in the wood. Some houses have raised floors, yours doesn't. Yours is packed earth, topped with straw, some rushes, and a good deal of dirt from boots and spilled stew. The rushes get changed once a season. Maybe. You shuffle toward the hearth and stick your hands out. The fire's modest but growing. Whoever started it tosses you a look. Not quite warm, but better than frostbite. You crouch and extend your palms toward the flames, watching the red creep back into your knuckles. Your nose drips. Your lips are cracked. You touch the tip of your ear. It's so cold you wonder if it's still part of your face. As the rest of the house stirs, you notice how everyone deals with it differently. The old ones barely complain. They've seen worse. They sleep closer to the fire, claim the best corners, the thickest cloaks. The kids cry, whine, press into adults for the warmth like puppies. You've just learned to accept it, because the house is built this way for a reason. Thick stone walls keep out wind better than wood, even if they store cold like a freezer. The thatch roof may leak, but it's surprisingly good at keeping in heat when dry. The single room helps too, less space to heat, more bodies in close quarters. You don't know the word insulation, but you understand the concept through experience. You know to keep the shutters latched tight, to wedge rags and straw in the cracks near the door. You know to keep the fire fed through the day but bank it at night so it lasts. You know that moving too far from the group while you sleep means waking up stiff and miserable. And you know that the floor matters, because if there's one thing medieval families figured out quickly, It's that cold seeps from below. That's why you lay straw or hay on the floor. It's why people with a little more money put down woven mats or layers of animal skins. Richer folks had stone tiles, but even they put thick carpets over them during winter. The floor is the enemy. It steals warmth like a jealous ghost. You hear the rooster, not outside, but inside. Of course, it's too cold for animals out in the pen, so some of them live in here with you. Not glamorous, very loud, occasionally smelly, but their body heat adds up. It's not uncommon for pigs to sleep in the corner. Maybe a goat or two. You've kicked a chicken by accident before. Once you woke up with a cat on your face. Survival is not tidy. One of the children sneezes, and someone curses in Latin. That's never good. Illness spreads fast in the winter. No ventilation means that everyone breathes in everyone else's coughs. You wrap your cloak tighter and try not to think about it. The stew pot bubbles gently over the fire now, mostly turnips and leeks. No meat today, maybe not this week. You'll have to earn your warmth in other ways. Historical fact. Medieval cottages often had thatched roofs and one main room for the entire family. This design preserved heat and simplified daily life, especially in the cold seasons. Quirky fact. In some villages, people spread aromatic herbs like lavender or tansy over rushes on the floor. Not for warmth, but to mask the smell of living in one room with animals. Ongoing debate. Some historians argue peasant homes were colder than we imagine, while others believe their construction methods and communal habits kept them surprisingly livable. You're not going back to sleep. That ship has sailed, probably sunk, and is now resting at the bottom of a frozen lake. So you start moving, slowly, reluctantly. Your legs creak like old wood, your shoulders pop, and you try not to trip over the goat that's somehow wedged itself near the hearth. One of the children grumbles from the bed, half asleep and dreaming of summer probably. You envy them for a second, then push the thought away. You've got a job to do. And right now that job is surviving. Before anything else you need warmth, not from the fire, although it's coming along nicely thanks to whoever took fire duty this morning, but from the oldest and most reliable heat source on Earth, human bodies. You glance toward the bed and then the pallets scattered around the room. Everyone is huddled up, layered in cloaks, shawls, tunics, sometimes all three at once, and the truth is, none of you are just sleeping in the same bed because you like each other. You sleep together because your life might depend on it. The bed isn't luxurious. It's a simple wooden frame with ropes stretched across for support and a lumpy mattress stuffed with straw, hay, or whatever was dry and somewhat soft at the time. Some nights it feels like sleeping on a bag of pine cones. Other nights you'd swear the mice are throwing a party underneath. But still it beats the cold floor. The mattress might be mouldy, the blankets might smell like damp wool and wet dog, but once you pile in, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, it gets warm, eventually. You remember what it's like, those first 10 minutes after crawling in at night. Everyone's stiff, cold, grumpy. You hiss when icy feet press against your legs. Someone always steals the best corner of the blanket. There's a brief flurry of whispered curses, elbow jabs, negotiations, and then, slowly, it starts to work. The collective heat begins to settle in, a small miracle in the dark. You stop shivering, your fingers unclench. You drift off to the sound of breathing, snoring, and the occasional muttered dream ramble. It's not romantic, it's necessity. Some families had beds big enough to fit 5 or 6 people at once. Parents, children, sometimes a servant, if you were well off enough to have one. But even in smaller homes, the rule of thumb was simple. The more bodies, the more warmth. And if there wasn't space in the bed, there were floor pallets, blankets or straw mats laid near the fire, often shared by siblings or cousins. It wasn't uncommon for guests to sleep packed in with the family during winter festivals, wrapped in their cloaks and grateful just to not be freezing alone. People learned to layer long before it became a fashion statement. You wore your warmest tunic to bed, along with woolen hose, thick socks, maybe 2 pairs if you could afford it, and a cap. Always a cap. The cold night air didn't care about your hairline. You could lose serious body heat through your head. So you slept bundled like a cabbage, your breath fogging the air beneath your blanket, your nose the only part of your face exposed. And even that was negotiable. But let's be honest, it wasn't always effective. Sometimes the cold won. You'd wake up with fingers too stiff to bend. Your toes would ache like they'd been stomped on. You'd find frost clinging to the inside of the shutters. There were mornings when you had to pour warm water over your boots just to get them flexible enough to wear. The cold wasn't just outside, it was inside, creeping in through the floor, the walls, even the bedding itself. Still, People adapted. They found small ways to game the system. Before bed, you might place a warmed brick or a heated stone wrapped in cloth beneath the covers, a proto-hot water bottle. Not everyone had access to such luxuries, but if you did, it made a real difference. Even a hot iron skillet left by the fire could be transferred to the bed for a few minutes of comfort. You couldn't waste a single calorie of heat. Of course, all this closeness had its downsides. There was always that one person who snored like a war drum. Someone else would mutter in their sleep. Kids wet the bed. Dogs farted. Goats occasionally did something worse. And if anyone had lice, well, now everyone had lice, but again, warmth. You could either sleep alone, shiver, and possibly die, or spoon your grandmother and take your chances. There's an unspoken rule about night time in medieval homes. The fire must never go completely out. Embers can be revived. Flames? Not so much. If the hearth goes cold, someone has to go out and borrow fire from a neighbour. That means stepping into the freezing dark in the middle of the night, carrying a pot of embers across icy paths while wrapped in nothing but a cloak and a grim sense of duty. Better to keep the coals alive. So even during sleep, there's a system. Someone wakes in the night, perhaps from the cold or a bad drum or a particularly loud chicken, and checks the fire. If the embers are low, they poke and prod, maybe toss in a small log. Then they go back to bed, trying to wedge themselves into a warm spot that's no longer theirs. Arguments sometimes ensue. You shift near the fire now, holding out your hands again. The warmth is stronger. You take a deep breath, watching it fog the air. Around you the others are stirring. The bed shuffles, someone groans. The day is starting, whether you like it or not. And outside the wind is still screaming. Historical fact, shared sleeping arrangements were common not just in peasant homes, but even in some inns and lodging houses. Strangers might sleep two to a bed just to stay warm. Quirky fringe fact. In some parts of Europe, it was believed that sleeping with your feet to the east would bring health and prevent nightmares. Yes, even in winter. Debate spotlight. There's still scholarly disagreement over how widespread bed sharing was among adults in medieval households. Some argue it was more common in poorer families, while others believe it cut across all classes. There's something oddly ceremonial about the medieval bed. Not that you'd call it that. You're too busy surviving to get poetic about furniture. But still, if you step back and squint a little, the bed feels like a kind of sacred space, a shared battleground, a haven, a war zone, sometimes all three before sunrise. And when you really think about it, the way your family uses the bed is very different from how you imagined bedtime might look in some grand castle or noble hall. Because in your world, beds are enormous wooden beasts, heavy and creaking, carved if you're lucky, slapped together with raw planks if you're not. Most peasant beds don't look like much. Plain frames with thick rope lattices beneath, sagging under the weight of overuse. You've had to tighten those ropes more than once, and the phrase sleep tight suddenly makes a lot more sense when you realise it came from a time when loose ropes meant a lumpy, miserable night. Your mattress, a sack stuffed with straw, sometimes hay, occasionally moss or feathers if you're feeling fancy. It's not soft. In fact, you usually fall asleep with your hips or spine pressed into a hard point of something sharp and unidentifiable. It's like sleeping on a scratchy pile of well-organised yard clippings. You try not to think too hard about what's nesting in there with you. Denial is its own kind of comfort. Now, if you're really lucky, or living in the home of a wealthier family, you might have a curtained bed. Oh yes, curtains. Not for privacy, forget that, there's no privacy here. But for warmth, heavy wool or linen curtains, drawn around the bed at night, help trap body heat like a tiny human-powered sauna. The inside of that curtain cocoon is warmer by at least a few degrees. You feel the difference immediately. The air is still, close-scented like wet wool and sleep. You'll take it. Curtains also mean that you can pretend for a little while that the rest of the freezing room doesn't exist. You can forget that there's a chicken pecking around under the table, or a goat occasionally chewing something it definitely shouldn't be. You can pretend that the baby in the corner isn't about to cry again. The curtain makes your part of the world a little less cruel, a little less cold, and in richer households, oh, the beds are something else entirely. Raised high off the floor, partly to avoid drafts, partly just to show off, they're layered with feather mattresses, embroidered coverlets, and maybe even a fur or two. The wood is carved, polished, and strong enough to support not just one or two sleepers, but sometimes entire families, including servants and even the occasional dog. Some beds are so tall you need steps to get into them. literal stairs to reach your dreams. You're still sleeping in a sack of straw, but hey, nice to know what you're missing. But even in those grand houses, the logic is the same. Sleep together, stay warm. Family beds, servant beds, guest beds. Everyone's packed in like pastries in an oven. In fact, travellers staying at inns often had to share beds with total strangers. And not just in times of emergency. If there was a free half of a bed, it was yours for the night, no questions asked. Comfort was secondary. Warmth was everything. Back in your own house, you start the daily routine of fluffing, or more accurately, beating the mattress. You lift one corner, shake out the straw, and smooth it back into something vaguely bed-shaped. Someone else helps tighten the ropes, pulling them taut with a rhythmic practice movement. It's a quiet job. No one talks much. You all slept in the same spot last night, so there's not much new to say. You lay the blanket back across the bed. It's thick wool, scratchy as always, but strong. It's been patched and repatched, handed down through generations. Some of the repairs are obvious, big cross-stitched seams in red thread. Others are almost invisible, the work of a patient hand on a cold night. It's not pretty, but it's still here, and that means something. Sleeping in the medieval world isn't just about resting, it's about survival strategy. You learn early on how to position your body to block drafts. You know which sibling makes the best heat source, and which ones kick in their sleep. You learn to breathe shallowly when the blanket starts to smell too strongly of wet wool and old sweat. And most of all, you learn that sleeping is communal. You might not love everyone you sleep next to, but for those coldest winter months, your survival depends on them. That's part of why beds are so big. Not because space is abundant, space is a luxury few have, but because warmth demands closeness. The average medieval peasant family shares one bed. Maybe two, if there's an elder or a newlywed couple who've somehow earned the privilege. But for the most part, everyone crams in. Parents, children, grandparents. Sickness? Death? You still sleep close, you have to. And honestly, it works. Your shared heat makes the bed the warmest place in the house by far. You dread getting out of it in the morning even though you do it every day. You remember nights when snow hit so hard that it piled up against the door and froze it shut, and the only warmth came from that collective huddle beneath the threadbare blanket. You remember sharing dreams, stories, even secrets in that bed, whispering into the dark while the wind howled beyond the walls. Of course, not everyone romanticizes it. Some folks complain endlessly, the snoring, the smell, the elbows in your face. But when the frost starts creeping across the window shutters and your breath fogs the air, you all stop complaining. You just pull the blanket tighter, tuck your feet beneath someone else's legs, and press your forehead into the wool until sleep takes you. Because in the end, that bed is more than furniture. It's your fireplace when the fire dies out. It's your shield against the cold. It's the one place where your family becomes not just company, but climate control. Historical fact. The medieval great bed often slept multiple family members and could be passed down through generations as a prized possession and symbol of stability. Quirky fringe fact. One 16th century bed still preserved today, the Great Bed of Ware, is over 10 feet wide and reputed to sleep 4 couples at once. It was probably more novelty than norm, but still, imagine that sleepover. Debate spotlight. Some historians argue that shared beds were a necessity born purely from poverty, while others suggest they also reinforce social bonds and community traditions within households. It happens every night. Like clockwork, right around the time your body finally settles into something close to sleep, it strikes. Nature calls. You fight it at first. You shift under the blanket, wedge yourself deeper into the mass of warmth and limbs, and pretend you didn't feel it. You try to will your bladder into submission, but deep down you already know you're going to have to get up, and it's going to be miserable. You sigh. It's a quiet, desperate sort of sigh, the kind that says, I'd rather be eaten by wolves than step out from under this blanket. But dignity only lasts so long. Eventually, you start peeling yourself away from the warm huddle. It's like leaving the only patch of sunlight in a snowstorm. The cold slams into you like a wall. Your breath fogs instantly. Your toes scream in protest, and the blanket flops down behind you like it's judging your life choices. There's no bathroom. You know this. Of course there's no bathroom. This is the medieval period, not a countryside Airbnb. If you're lucky, there's a chamber pot nearby. A wide ceramic or metal bowl tucked in a corner, ideally not already too full. If you're less lucky, It's out in the main room, or someone else has just used it and forgotten to dump it, in which case you might seriously consider holding it until sunrise, but you don't, because you've been through this before and you know what happens when you try to wait too long. So you grope your way across the room in the dark, whispering apologies to every living creature you accidentally step on. Someone mutters something from the bed. You ignore them. The fire is out now, or nearly, just a few dying embers offering a faint orange glow. It's not enough to see by, but just enough to throw weird, twisted shadows on the wall, which, in the middle of the night, is less than comforting. You find the chamber pot. Thank every saint you can think of. It's cold. Everything's cold. You do your business as fast as humanly possible, trying not to think about the sound, the smell, or the fact that you'll be the one emptying this later if you're the first awake. There's no toilet paper. You've got cloth rags, or maybe moss, depending on how well supplied the household is this week. You've learned not to complain. Complaining doesn't make it warmer, or less disgusting. Now comes the worst part, getting back in bed. You turn, already missing the faint heat of the sleeping pile. You move fast, or try to, but the cold air has made your joints stiff. It's like your limbs are moving through syrup. You lift the blanket and crawl back under, aiming for your original spot, but someone's shifted into it. Of course they have. There are no assigned seats in this bed, only temporary claims and the unspoken rule that warmth belongs to whoever holds it. You wedge yourself into the nearest gap, elbows and knees meeting resistance. Someone grumbles, you elbow back. It's a dance as old as time, and no one wins. Eventually you find a spot that's at least 70% yours, and you try to warm it up before your body goes completely numb. Your feet are blocks of ice. You push them against your siblings' calves. They yelp and kick, but you hold your ground. Cold feet are a weapon and a right. Sleep comes slower the second time. Now you're more awake than you wanted to be. You can hear everything, the wind pressing against the shutter, the occasional creak of the timber frame, a rat rustling in the corner where the grain sacks sit. You wonder if the fire will last till morning. You hope no one else has to get up, because if they do, you know they'll let in on another blast of freezing air, and your newly warmed spot will evaporate like a dream. And yes, sometimes, if the chamber pot isn't an option, or if you're out in the barn or on the road or staying in someone's overcrowded house, you have to go outside, in the dead of night, into the snow or rain or worse. You pull on your boots, wrap your cloak tight, grab a torch if there is one, there usually isn't, and brace yourself. There's a pit toilet somewhere out back, a hole in the ground with a wooden plank and a door that doesn't quite close. You don't even sit, you just hover, pray and try not to scream, but tonight at least you're that. You're back in bed now, slowly thawing again. Someone beside you has started snoring loud and confident. Another person is talking in their sleep, something about bread. You don't want to know. You pull the blanket up over your ears and try to disappear. It's easy to romanticize medieval life from the distance of centuries. Candles flickering, families gathered close, the cozy glow of firelight on ancient stone. But the reality is that everything was harder. Even something as basic as getting through the night without freezing or embarrassing yourself took effort, planning, and a tolerance for discomfort that most modern people can't imagine. Still you adapt. You find the warm spots. You learn not to flinch when you hear rats. You build muscle memory for the chamber pot shuffle. You even develop a kind of sixth sense for when someone's about to steal the blanket, and you grab your edge just in time, and somehow you get through the night. Historical fact: chamber pots were used well into the 19th century, often stored under the bed or in a corner of the room, and emptied each morning into a communal waste pit or river. Quirky fringe fact: in some areas, people placed iron tongs or knives near the bed to ward off nighttime spirits, especially when they had to get up during the witching hour. Debate spotlight. Historians still argue over how often medieval families used outdoor versus indoor options for relieving themselves, especially in winter months. Records vary by region and class. You're awake again, this time not because of your bladder or someone elbowing you in the ribs, but because something's wrong, subtle but wrong. You open your eyes to the faint red flicker dancing across the far wall. That can't be good. You sit up slowly, groggy, your blanket falling off your shoulders like a shrugged-off promise. The fire, the hearth, it's almost out. You don't panic exactly, but your heart starts thudding like a muffled drum. That fire is the difference between a tolerable night and a dangerous one. Not just for you, but for everyone. If the embers die entirely, you'll wake up to a room filled with foggy breath, stiff fingers, and the kind of frost that creeps across the walls like ivy. Worse still, someone might have to venture out into the night to beg a coal from a neighbour, assuming they even have one to spare. So you rise, again, a little more irritated this time, but with a creeping sense of duty. You shuffle across the room toward the hearth, careful not to trip over the cat. Or is it a chicken? It moves, offended, and disappears into the shadows. You crouch by the fireplace. It's glowing faintly, the coals like sleeping eyes. A small pile of twigs rests nearby, and a few logs lean against the wall, hoarded carefully. Firewood doesn't grow on trees, not in winter, not when everything's wet or frozen. You gently poke the coals with a long stick, stirring them back to life. A few sparks jump. That's good. You add a dry twig, then another. You blow gently at first, then harder, until the tip of your nose goes numb from the effort. There's a familiar whoosh, and a small flame dances up, licking at the twig. You feed it more, coaxing it along like a sick child. You can feel the heat starting to return, just enough to flush your cheeks. Your fingers tingle with gratitude. No one else wakes up. They're all used to it. Someone always gets the short straw. You glance back at the bed and the pallets scattered around. A few shapes twitch in their sleep. One person groans and rolls over, but mostly it's silent, peaceful in a way, just the soft crackle of fire, the whisper of wind outside, and your own breathing in the cold dark. Keeping the fire alive isn't just about warmth. It's a kind of ritual, one passed down without much ceremony, but never forgotten. You were shown how to do it as a child, how to bank the coals under ashes so they last, how to arrange the wood so it catches, how to whisper to the flame like you're asking it for a favour. Because you kind of are, and if you get it wrong, you risk a night without heat, or worse, you risk starting a fire that burns down your house. That's happened before in other villages. Someone got too confident, added too much too fast, and the dry thatch above caught like tinder. There's a reason every house has a water bucket nearby, even if the water inside is frozen solid half the time. You settle onto a low stool, still watching the flame grow. You wrap your cloak tighter around yourself and let your thoughts wander. The fire becomes a kind of meditation. You're tired, sure. Your legs ache. Your back twinges every time you shift, and your stomach's already thinking about breakfast. But for now, you're just here, keeping the warmth alive. It's funny how much responsibility the hearth carries. It's the heart of the home, literally and figuratively. It's where meals are cooked, where stories are told, where wounds are cleaned and prayers whispered. It's where people gather, not just for comfort, but for survival. When the world outside is frozen and cruel, the fire is the one thing standing between you and the abyss. You glance up at the chimney hole above. Smoke curls upward into the night, escaping through a gap in the roof that's been blackened by centuries of soot. In the dead of winter, smoke doesn't rise easily. The air presses down with a stubborn chill, and sometimes the smoke gets trapped, curling around your heads, making your eyes burn. Still, it's better than nothing. And there's always a danger that the fire dies without anyone noticing. That's happened too. Once, your uncle's fire went out, and no one had spare coals to lend. He had to walk to the next village, carrying a bucket of half-frozen ash and begging for a glowing ember. By the time he got back, his fingers were nearly frostbitten. Now, he wraps them in wool even during summer. Says they never quite stopped aching. You add one more log cautiously. It hisses with moisture but catches slowly. The glow strengthens. You feel it radiating toward you now, reaching your face, your knees, even your chest. A small luxury this moment. For a few minutes, you're not freezing. You're just tired. But you'll take tired over frozen any day. Eventually you stand as the stool creaks. You stretch your arms out, feel your joints pop. Your breath rises in the firelight like smoke. You want to return to bed, crawl back into the shared heat and drift off until morning. But first, you bank the fire carefully. Pile a little ash over the coals, protect them so they'll still be warm at dawn. That's the trick. Let the flame sleep but never die. You lie back down, this time closer to the fire than before. The spot is cold at first, of course it is, but you curl into yourself, wrap your arms around your ribs and pull your cap down over your ears. Slowly the warmth you've earned begins to seep in. The fire crackles once, like a thank you. Someone stirs and rolls toward you, grumbling in their sleep. Another night, another narrow escape from frost. Historical fact. In most medieval homes, the central hearth was not only the main heat source, but also the cooking station and spiritual centre. Some even featured a family shrine nearby. Quirky fringe fact: in Northern Europe, some families would bury bread crusts in the ashes of the hearth to keep evil spirits out and ensure the fire stayed strong overnight. Debate spotlight. Scholars disagree on how frequently fires were maintained through the night. Some argue many let them go cold to avoid smoke inhalation, while others insist fire tending was an essential nightly ritual. The sun still hasn't risen, but morning is sneaking in through the cracks, quiet and grey, like a thief who doesn't want to be noticed. You can feel it in the subtle shift of the air, the faint, distant caw of a crow waking before everyone else. You blink against the gloom, stretched out on your back, still tucked under a mound of scratchy wool. Your feet are warmer now, your hands no longer feel like wood, and your nose is, well, still cold but less aggressively so. That's a win. The fire's holding barely. A weak orange glow peeks out from under the ash, just enough to keep the frost off the walls. It's still cold, your breath is still visible in the air, but it's not bone deep, not the sharp bite of midnight cold. This is morning cold, a little gentler, but not by much. Now comes the next question. Do you get up or do you stall for a few more precious minutes of warmth? You already know the answer, but you let yourself pretend anyway. You stretch beneath the covers, pulling one leg up, then the other, careful not to bump the person next to you, your little brother, still snoring like a congested bear. You'd love to stay here all day, tangled in this sad bundle of shared fabric and body heat, but the truth is, there's work to do. The kind of work that doesn't care if you're warm or rested or even conscious. You roll onto your side and start the ritual of getting dressed without leaving the bed. This is a skill, a talent, an art form, passed down through generations. Step 1. Locate your clothes. Not always easy in a house where garments double as pillows, blankets, and sometimes insulation for the windows. Your tunic is wadded into a corner of the bed. You tug it free, shake it out, and wince at how stiff and cold it is. It feels like a frozen towel. Still, you wriggle into it under the covers, trying to trap some of the residual body heat before it escapes. Next, hose. Not pants, not exactly. These are like leggings. Woolen, stretchy in the worst way, and designed to cling to your legs like judgment. They're always slightly damp. Always. You shimmy into them with the skill of a contortionist, trying not to let the cold fabric touch too much bare skin. Then come your socks, thick and coarse, possibly older than you. Then a second tunic, maybe a cloak, maybe another shawl around your shoulders if you're lucky. Layering is everything. That's the real trick of sleeping through medieval winters. You never take off more than you have to, and you always add more than seems reasonable. People didn't have closets full of outfits. They had a few items they wore until they fell apart, then stitched them back together, then wore them again. Every layer is a barrier between you and the cold, no matter how ugly, itchy, or pungent. And when it comes to sleeping wear versus day wear, they're usually the same thing. You sleep in your tunic, you work in your tunic, you go to church in that same tunic, maybe with a slightly cleaner one over top. You don't strip down unless you're bathing, and in winter, that happens very rarely. Once a week, maybe, once a month, more like it. Your clothes become a second skin, an itchy, smelly, vital skin. As you sit up fully, your blanket slides off and the cold clamps down instantly. It's always a shock, no matter how many mornings you've done this. The room is dim, the fire struggling, and your breath still curls like smoke. The others are starting to stir now. Your mother wraps her cloak tighter around her shoulders. Someone coughs. One of the smaller children whines and buries their face in the blanket. You sympathise deeply. There's no time to linger. The morning chores won't wait just because your fingers are numb. You pull on your boots, hard leather, cracked at the toes, stiff from the cold. They've been warming near the hearth all night, but somehow still manage to feel like ice when you slip them on. You wiggle your toes, trying to wake them up, then stand slowly. Every joint complains. You're 20-something, but feel like you're 80. The wind outside groans against the shutters. You can hear it trying to get in. You glance at the window, a hole covered with oiled parchment, not glass. It lets in a little light, but no warmth. Sometimes during the worst storms, you stuff it with cloth or hay. Anything to slow the draft. But right now, it's just glowing faintly with morning gloom. You grab a woolen cap and pull it over your head, tucking your ears in. Head covering is non-negotiable. Without it, you'd lose heat faster than you can replace it. People in the Middle Ages didn't have thermal underwear or fleece neck warmers. They had layers, wool, linen, sometimes fur if you were lucky, and always a cap, even in bed, especially in bed. You glance around the room as others start to rise. Everyone's moving slowly, groaning, stretching, complaining in whispers. Your father rubs his hands together and mutters about firewood. Your sister wraps a scarf around her waist like a belt. The old dog by the hearth lifts its head, yawns with a dramatic sigh, and curls back up like it's got seniority over everyone. Honestly, it probably does. The stew pot is still sitting over the embers, now thick and congealed. Someone adds a little water and stirs it back into something edible. Breakfast will be hot, if not exactly exciting. Root vegetables, some barley if there's any left, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of salted meat. But the important thing is that it's warm. Warm food is as good as gold in the winter. You squat by the fire and hold your hands out again. You already miss the bed, even if it smelled like feet and regret. At least it was warm. But now, you're dressed, you're layered. You're ready to face the day, sort of. Historical fact. Wool was the most commonly used winter fabric in medieval Europe. Prized for its warmth and availability, peasants and nobles alike layered it heavily during colder months. Quirky fringe fact. Some people wore a nightcap, not just for warmth, but to prevent evil spirits from entering their ears while they slept. The logic? Cold air will open doors for mischief. Debate spotlight. Scholars still discuss how much layering was possible for the poor. Some argue peasants had only 1 or 2 garments total, while others believe layering was common using patchwork and recycled cloth. You wouldn't call what you slept on a bed exactly, not in the plush, pillow-top, bounce-tested sense of the word. It's more like a sagging suggestion of comfort. A lumpy sack stuffed with straw, tucked into a wooden frame that creaks every time someone breathes too heavily near it. And yet, for all its flaws, it's still one of the warmest spots in the house. You rise from it reluctantly, casting one last glance at the rumpled wool blankets as if they might plead with you to come back. But they don't. They just sit there, heavy and damp around the edges, waiting for the next person to claim the small sanctuary they offer. You step onto the straw-covered floor. The rushes crackle underfoot, and the occasional dry clump sticks to your socks. It smells faintly of mildew, and, if you're honest, a hint of mouse urine. A reminder that the mattress isn't the only thing stuffed with straw around here. The floor itself, layered with rushes, herbs, and whatever else you've got, is meant to soak up spills, soften your steps, and slightly muffle the cold that seeps up from the ground. Slightly. You still feel it in your knees. Somewhere behind you, someone sneezes themselves awake. It's loud, wet, and immediately followed by a cough that sounds like it's been echoing through their lungs all winter. Lovely. You move toward the mattress, thinking about whether it's your turn to shake it out and restuff it. Probably. It always is. The straw inside shifts constantly, flattening under the weight of too many bodies, turning from something vaguely syrky into a compacted mat that's about as soft as a stack of old parchment. You pull the mattress up from the wooden slats underneath. The ropes crisscrossing the bed frame have gone slack again. No surprise. You grab the nearest peg and twist, tightening the ropes to bring back a little tension. The phrase "sleep tight" suddenly clicks again in your head, as it always does during this chore. You feel oddly smug every time you remember that little linguistic nugget. It's the kind of fact you wish you could toss into a conversation at a fancy dinner party, if such a thing existed in your life, which it definitely doesn't. With the mattress hoisted, you shake out the straw. Bits of it drift into the air, catching the firelight like golden dust. Some of it's mouldy, and there's a suspicious lump near one edge that you decide not to investigate too closely. You'll refill it later, maybe even mix in a little fresh hay from the barn. If you're lucky, you'll find feathers, though not many. Feather beds are rare treasures, usually reserved for nobles, clergy, or the local healer with a mysterious income stream. You pause for a moment, rubbing the back of your hand across your forehead. Your breath fogs again in the cold air. Around you, other family members are going through the same morning rituals, folding blankets, rolling up cloaks, arguing about whose turn it is to check on the animals. Someone's muttering about lice again. That's another charming feature of your sleeping arrangement. No matter how warm your bed is, it's never just you in there. You share it with a rotating cast of insects, some large enough to deserve names. The straw mattress is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it provides some cushioning between your body and the cold, hard wood beneath. On the other, it's a breeding ground for pests and mould. You try not to think about what lives inside it. You try not to scratch too much during the day, or examine the little bites on your legs in too much detail. There are herbs for this. Lavender, tansy, wormwood. Sometimes they help. Sometimes they just make the bed smell vaguely like a soup you'd never want to eat. Still, this mattress is a point of pride in its own odd way. You remember when it was stitched? Your mother spent 3 days at it, muttering as she worked, stuffing it with a careful blend of straw and hand-picked thistledown. You helped, your fingers turning red from the rough cloth. It was never perfect, but it was yours. And compared to the pallets on the floor, or worse, a bare patch of earth in a barn, this thing feels like royalty. You step back and take stock. The bed is as good as it's going to get for now. The blankets are draped over a bench to air out, steaming faintly in the fire's heat. You think about beds in castles, how the nobility have mattresses filled with goose feathers, fine linen sheets, and actual pillows. You've never touched a pillow, not a real one. Sometimes you bundle up an old cloak and fold it twice for neck support. It smells like sheep and wet wood, but it does the job. You've heard stories, maybe exaggerated, maybe not, of royal beds so soft you sink into them like dough. Beds with velvet hangings, fur-lined blankets, and warming pans filled with coals to take the chill off before sleep. And you wonder, just briefly, what that kind of comfort feels like. What it would be like to lie in bed and not feel your spine rebel. But daydreaming is a luxury, and you've got work to do. You tie up the bed ropes one last time and pat the mattress into the place. Lumpy, but better than nothing. Tonight, when you crawl back into it, it'll be a little softer. A little less mouldy. Maybe even a little warmer if the day's fire burns well and you remember to tuck the blanket in at your shoulders. One of the younger children comes over, dragging a corner of the blanket behind them like a reluctant ghost. They're sniffly, bleary-eyed, and clearly hoping someone else will take care of the chores. You hand them a small bundle of herbs and tell them to scatter it over the straw. They look confused, but they do it. It's not much, but sometimes a little scent of sage or thyme can mask the rest of the smells that come with too many people sleeping in the same room on reused straw. You glance out the window at Payton. Light is building now, thin and watery, like broth that's been boiled too many times. The world outside is grey and cold, but the bed behind you still holds the faint echo of warmth. It's not perfect, but it got you through another night. Historical fact: most medieval beds used a lattice of ropes to support the mattress, which had to be regularly tightened to prevent sagging, hence the expression sleep tight. Quirky fringe fact: in some regions families would place blessed coins, dried herbs, or even bits of iron inside mattresses to ward off evil spirits or illness during winter. Debate spotlight. Historians still debate how often straw mattresses were cleaned or changed. Some believe they were replaced seasonally, while others argue most were used until they practically disintegrated. The windows in your cottage aren't really windows, not the way you might think of them. There's no glass, no double panes, no cheerful frosting of condensation like you would find in a modern kitchen, just rectangular openings in the walls, small and irregular, covered by stretched parchment that has been rubbed with animal fat to make it semi-transparent. It lets in a dull yellowish light, enough to tell you that the sun is technically out there somewhere, but it doesn't do much else. It certainly doesn't keep out the cold. You run your fingers along the edge of the frame. The cloth that's been stuffed into the cracks is damp and beginning to freeze. That's the thing about medieval winters. They find the smallest gap and shove themselves through it like a pickpocket. The draft coming through the window feels alive, threading around your fingers and up your sleeves like it's searching for skin to torment. You tug your cloak tighter and reach for more stuffing, rags, straw, even a few dry reeds you pulled from the riverbed last autumn, anything to plug the holes. Some households don't even bother with the parchment. They just have shutters, wooden slabs that swing closed over the openings. In those cases, winter means choosing between daylight and warmth. Either you open the shutter and let in the morning light along with a generous blast of icy air, or you keep it sealed and stumble around half blind. Your family tries to balance both. One shutter open, one mostly closed. Let in just enough light to find your boots, but not so much that the whole house becomes an icebox. You grab the edge of the shutter now, hesitating. You know what's waiting outside. You've seen it every morning for weeks. Frost so thick it looks like sugar, the faintest crust of snow clinging to the eaves, and the brittle silence of a world frozen stiff. Still, curiosity wins. You open the shutter a few inches and peek out. The wind nips at your face like a rude neighbour. Your breath fogs instantly. It's exactly as you expected. The ground is covered in a patchy quilt of snow and frozen mud, the kind that crunches underfoot and never quite melts until spring. The sky is dull grey, the colour of wet wool. and the air has that biting stillness that tells you it's not going to warm up anytime soon. You spot smoke rising from the chimneys of nearby homes, thin trails like they're being rationed. Everyone's doing the same thing you are, trying to stay warm without using up the last of the firewood. You close the shutter quickly and wedge it shut with a chunk of wood. No lock, just pressure and habit. That's enough to keep out the wind most nights, but not all. Sometimes in the middle of a storm you can feel the cold pushing in through every surface. That's when the windows get an extra layer, maybe a hanging cloth. Maybe a sheep's pelt if you can spare it. Your family once tried to use clay to seal up a particularly nasty gap near the sill. It held for 3 days before it cracked and fell off in chunks. Nice idea. Poor execution. Still, you adapt. People always adapt. Some villagers hang woven mats over the windows, thick with wool and bits of old fabric. Others use spare cloaks. You even heard once of a family that melted animal fat and smeared it along the windowsill to block drafts. It worked, apparently, until the dog decided to lick it all off. You glance over at your younger sister, who's sitting by the wall with her hands tucked into her sleeves, rocking slightly for warmth. The wind coming through the parchment window nearby keeps catching her hair, making it flutter like cobweb. She doesn't complain. No one really complains anymore. You just get used to it. When you grow up in this cold, you stop expecting comfort. Instead, you learn how to manage discomfort. You learn where the cold comes in, how to chase it out, how to sit just right so the wind misses your neck. And you learn to improvise. Take the window coverings, for instance. In richer homes, monasteries, noble estates, maybe a fancy urban merchant's place, you might see actual glass. Not the clear, clean panes you're used to, but thick, wavy bits of leaded glass that distort everything like you're looking through a puddle. They're beautiful and absurdly expensive. And most importantly, they keep out the wind. You've seen one once, maybe twice, during a delivery trip to a nearby manor. The light that came through it was golden. You wanted to just stand in it for a while like a lizard on a rock. But here, you've got parchment, maybe oiled cloth. Some days you just hang up your extra shirt and hope for the best. You can't see out clearly, but who needs a view when your eyelashes are freezing together? What matters is keeping that wind out, no matter how many rags it takes. Your mother once told you about a night, years ago, when a storm came in so fast that snow started blowing into the house through the window gaps. It was late, everyone was already in bed, and suddenly there were flakes on the floor, melting slowly into puddles. They had to plug every window with whatever they could find. Baskets, boots, even the stew pot. That was the same night the thatch started leaking. No one slept much. Everyone was damp. But they made it to morning. You think about that story now as you pat the edge of the window, feeling the cold radiate from it like it's something alive. There's no more snow today, just cold airs and low skies. You've done what you can. The draft's a little slower now, the rag's holding, at least for now. You'll check it again before bed. You always do. And it's not just windows that need tending. Every gap in this house is a potential enemy during winter. You've stuffed straw into the spaces between floorboards, sealed the doorframe with bundles of dry herbs, even used old shoes to block the holes near the baseboards. It looks ridiculous, but function always wins over style in this world. Let the cold laugh, it still can't get in. Well, mostly. Historical fact, glass windows were extremely rare in medieval peasant homes. Oiled parchment or cloth was the norm, while glass was a luxury reserved for the wealthy and religious institutions. Quirky fringe fact, some households use slabs of translucent animal horn as makeshift window panes, horn shaved thin enough to let in light while keeping out wind and rain. Debate spotlight? Scholars continue to explore how much effort lower-class medieval families invested in insulating their homes. Some argue most relied on body heat alone, while others highlight creative insulation techniques using available materials. By now, the cottage is fully awake, though it never quite feels alive in the way you'd hope. Everyone is moving slowly, stiffly, like half-thawed statues going through the motions of daily life. The fire's been stoked again, breathing life back into the heart of the room, and the steam from the stew pot has returned, filling the air with the earthy scent of onions and turnips. It's not delicious exactly, but it's warm, and that alone makes it good. You sit near the hearth, letting the heat hit your face while your hands hover over the flames, fingers splayed like flowers trying to bloom. You've regained some feeling in your toes, your nose has stopped dripping, and you're no longer shivering in a way that makes your teeth knock together. Progress. Everyone else is crowding near the fire now too. There's no social hierarchy here, just survival geometry. Whoever is closest gets the best of it. And no one's giving up an inch without a fight. The younger children press close, cramming their fingers against the hot bricks at the edge of the hearth. You warn them not to get too close. They ignore you, of course. A burnt finger is better than frostbitten toes, and everyone knows that scars make good stories later. But even as the fire offers its comfort, someone still has to keep watch. Not just over the flames, but over everything, the doors, the windows, the livestock in the pen out back. The cold may be cruel, but the real danger isn't always frost. It's the things that come creeping in under the cover of night. Wolves, stray dogs, desperate thieves, maybe even something worse if you believe the village superstitions. And while you wouldn't say you're scared exactly, there is a reason someone always stays half awake. It's usually unspoken. No one assigns the job, you just do it. Maybe it's your turn tonight. Maybe it was your mother last night, or your older brother the night before. But at least one person always sleeps lighter than the rest, ears twitching at every bump, eyes cracking open at the sound of a hinge groaning or a chicken squawking outside. You never fully drop into deep sleep, not during the long winters. You can't afford to. There's always something that could go wrong while the rest of the world is buried in dreams. You've heard stories, everyone has, about the family whose cottage collapsed under snow while they slept, trapping them beneath a wall of cold. About the farm that burned to the ground because no one noticed the firewood pile had rolled too close to the embers. About the child who wandered outside in the night and wasn't found until morning, frozen like a statue. That one still haunts you. It's why you double-check the latch on the door before bed, every single night. So yes, someone keeps watch, even if no one talks about it. You might not be armed with much. A blunt stick, a carving knife, maybe just your voice loud enough to shout for help if the shadows start moving, but you sit or you lie with one eye open and you listen. You listen to the wind howling across the fields like it's searching for a way in. You listen to the groan of the timber frame above you, expanding and shrinking in the cold like it's breathing. You listen to the sighs of your family as they sleep, shifting and muttering, a lullaby of survival. And somewhere in that quiet, you begin to feel what it truly means to protect warmth. Not just heat, but the fragile, flickering warmth of life itself. It's a strange feeling watching over the sleeping room while the fire sputters and pops. You feel powerful somehow, important, like a sentinel on a mountaintop, even if you're really just a teenager wrapped in 4 layers of patched wool with a boot on one foot and a wet sock on the other. You feel the weight of the night pressing in, testing the seams of your shelter, but you hold steady. You sit by the fire. You keep it alive. You wonder if people in castles do the same thing. Do lords and ladies lie awake listening for wolves? Probably not. They've got guards, walls, dogs trained to bark before anything gets too close. But even in those big stone keeps, someone's awake. A servant, a guard, a nursemaid sitting by a cradle. Everyone has someone watching over the night. You just happen to be that someone right now. Eventually your eyes grow heavy. You shift your weight, let your back rest against the stone wall near the hearth. It's still warm from the fire, and the sensation is so pleasant it almost feels illegal. You close your eyes, just for a second, maybe 2, but even then, your ears stay tuned to the sounds of the house, the hiss of fire, the wind outside, the occasional cough from your grandfather still wrapped in a cloak by the far wall. Your dreams, when they come, are strange. Half-waking things filled with the rhythm of chores and the scent of smoke, and them you're still by the fire, still on duty, still listening. And maybe that's the point. Even when you sleep, part of you never quite does. It's the part that knows how cold it really is, how thin the walls are, how fast everything could fall apart if you aren't careful. So when you jolt awake again, 5 minutes later, or maybe 50, you're not surprised. The fire has dimmed again, just a few glowing coals left. You sigh, pull your cloak tighter, and shuffle back toward the firewood pile. It's going to be a long night. Historical fact. In many medieval households, someone was always tasked, formally or informally, with tending the hearth through the night, as letting the fire die could mean an entire morning lost to reigniting it. Quirky fringe fact. Some believe that if you let the fire go out at night, evil spirits or mischievous fae could enter through the hearth and bring misfortune to the household. Debate spotlight. There's ongoing scholarly discussion over how alert medieval people remained during the night, particularly in the peasant homes. Some argue for lighter, interrupted sleep driven by environmental factors, while others believe people often slept more deeply out of exhaustion. You don't notice the pig at first, which is impressive, considering it's the size of a barrel and currently snoring louder than most of your relatives. It's not until you stumble in the dark, half awake and trying to add more wood to the fire, that your foot meets something warm, solid and squishy, and you hear the indignant grunt of a sleeping animal that has just been kicked in the rear. You freeze, so does the pig. Then, like two half-conscious beings negotiating the awkward rules of shared space, you silently agree to pretend it never happened. Yes, there's a pig in the house. Actually, this time of year it's not even surprising. When the wind turns cruel and the earth gets crusted in ice, it's every warm body for itself. Livestock, if small enough, comes inside. Chickens, goats, pigs, sometimes even sheep if the barn is too cold or too far. You've had a cow in here once, that was chaos. Never again. The pig, though, this one's a regular. You raised her from a piglet. She's seen things, she has seniority. She's curled in the corner near the hearth, stretched out on a bed of straw, snoring, with the full-bellied authority of someone who's warmer than you and absolutely knows it. The fire crackles gently nearby, casting a flickering light over her coarse hide. You envy her a little. She's not worried about drafty windows or frostbitten fingers. She just sleeps and farts in that order. It wasn't always this way. During warmer seasons, the animals stay outside where they belong. But winter changes the rules. The barn becomes inhospitable, even dangerous. Water buckets freeze solid. Hay bales turn to stiff boards. And animals, just like you, can freeze to death in their sleep. So in they come, crossing that invisible line between outside and in. Your house isn't big, mind you. A single room, maybe two if you're fortunate, and definitely not designed for a rotating cast of livestock. But survival has no room for modesty. There's no inside or outside anymore. Just less cold and slightly more cold. So the pig gets a corner, the chickens huddle under the bench, and the goat, well, the goat goes wherever it wants, including occasionally climbing onto the woodpile and knocking everything over in the middle of the night. You've had to chase it out of the bed more than once. It's become a running joke that the goat gets better sleep than the rest of you. And yes, there are drawbacks. The smell, for starters. There's nothing subtle about the aroma of a full-grown pig spending the night indoors. It's earthy, pungent, and deeply committed to staying in your nose for hours. You sprinkle herbs on the floor to help. Thyme, rosemary, even some crushed juniper if you're lucky. It helps, a little, but it's like trying to perfume a battlefield. Then there's the noise. Animals don't sleep silently. They snort, grunt, scratch, and sometimes let loose sounds that make you sit bolt upright in the dark, convinced the world is ending. The chickens have no concept of quiet hours. They will squawk at shadows. The goat will complain if the fire gets too low. The pig, mercifully, just snores. Still, they're part of the routine now. You wake up and there they are. The chicken pecks at your bootlaces. The goat is chewing on the hem of someone's cloak. And the pig is still snoring, blissfully unaware that she nearly got booted into the stew pot during the last particularly lean week. You sit by the fire and scratch the pig behind the ear. She twitches once and settles deeper into her nest. You've grown fond of her, even if she smells like damp wool and old boots. She's warm, and in this season, warmth forgives many sins. There's something oddly comforting about sharing your space with animals. Maybe it's the familiarity of breathing alongside other living things. Maybe it's the strange sense of community that comes from knowing you're all suffering together, man and beast alike. Or maybe it's just that the pig gives off enough body heat to justify her presence. This isn't unique to your family, either. Throughout the village, other homes do the same. You've walked past cottages at night and heard the lowing of a cow inside, or caught the flutter of feathers through a cracked door. Some families have built little indoor pens, nothing more than a few planks nailed together in a corner. Others just toss down extra straw and hope for the best. Of course, not everyone approves. There's always that one neighbour who insists that bringing animals inside invites illness. They might not be wrong. You've all had coughs since November, and there's a suspicious rash developing on your younger brother's neck. But the alternative is frostbite and dead livestock, and you can't afford either. Besides, medieval medicine already blames everything from bad air to angry stars for illness. No one's pinning the winter plague on the pig in the corner. You glance at her now, still asleep, her massive belly rising and falling with the rhythm of a creature that has no fear of tomorrow. You wish you could borrow that peace, just for one night. But your peace looks more like a pile of itchy wool, the rattle of wind through the shutters, and the comforting stink of shared survival. Someone stirs behind you. Your mother, probably. She coughs once, low and wet, then wraps her shawl tighter and begins stirring the stew again. The room smells like onions and straw. You hand her a spoon, and she nods at the pig. "Better sleep than any of us," she mutters. You smile. It's true. Historical fact. In medieval peasant households, it was common during the winter for animals, especially pigs, chickens and goats, to sleep indoors for warmth and protection from predators. Quirky fringe fact. Some medieval families believed pigs could detect evil spirits or illness in a home and would observe their behaviour closely for signs of impending misfortune. Debate spotlight. Historians debate how widespread indoor animal keeping truly was. Some argue it was universal among the poor, while others suggest it varied depending on local architecture, weather, and social norms. There's a reason you're scratching your neck like a dog trying to solve a math problem. You know it. Everyone knows it. No one wants to talk about it, but here you are, dragging your nails down the same spot for the 5th time this hour. Welcome to medieval sleeping conditions, where surviving the cold means inviting 1,000 little freeloaders to the warmth party. Fleas, lice, bedbugs, mites, and probably a few species yet to be catalogued by science. They are here, they've been here, they're not leaving. At some point you stopped asking how they got into the mattress and started accepting that you and they are roommates now. No, not even roommates. House guests who moved in, stole your clothes, and now demand rent in the form of blood and dignity. You scratch again, this time at your forearm. You wince. That one drew a little blood. You glance around and notice your brother is doing the same. Your sister's twisting her braid into a knot, clearly inspecting it for movement. The goat scratches its ear against the bench leg, and you all sort of nod, silently united in your collective suffering. There are moments when the cold seems almost preferable to this slow, relentless itch. When you imagine flinging off the blankets, marching outside into the snow, and letting nature freeze every last insect into a tiny frozen statue. But you don't, because they'd be back before morning. Your mattress, for all its lumpy, straw-filled usefulness, is a 5-star resort for bugs. It's warm, dark, full of crevices, and constantly stocked with fresh human skin. Every fibre in it is like a hallway, a hiding spot, a tunnel into your misery. The straw shifts every time someone moves, dislodging new tenants who climb up your shirt like it's check-in time. And the blankets don't even start. Heavy wool is great for holding in body heat, also fantastic at holding in entire colonies of itching nightmares. There's a remedy for it. Well, several, depending on who you ask. Your grandmother swears by dried lavender. A handful stuffed into a linen pouch, tucked under your pillow, will drive out the wicked things. Your neighbour uses vinegar, dabbing it on her wrists and ankles like a very assertive perfume. Your cousin tried garlic once. That was a whole situation. You've resorted to the classic, chamuk. Once a week, someone drags the bedding outside, beats it within an inch of its life, then holds it over the fire smoke until the lice decide it's not worth it. It smells like burnt hair and desperation, but sometimes it works. You do the same to your tunic, assuming you get a chance to change it. Fresh clothes? Not likely. You've got one and maybe 2 outfits, and they both have names at this point. Still, it's hard to stay on top of it. The bugs come back, they always do. They hide in the seams, in the straw under the floorboards. You once found lice on the rim of your wooden bowl. That was a dark day. You ate anyway, you were hungry, so you've adapted. You learn to live with the itch. You scratch with style. You develop small ticks, a knuckle rub, a collarbone drag, the secret wrist twist that relieves just enough of the pressure. You know not to scratch too hard. You've seen people with welts, scabs, infections. A little discomfort is tolerable. A little. And then there's the psychological part, the late-night phantom itches. You'll be lying in bed, mostly warm, mostly content, and then a tickle on your thigh. You swat it, nothing. Another one behind your ear, still nothing. Suddenly you're convinced you're being swarmed. You throw off the blanket, pat yourself down like you're on fire, only to realise it's just the brush of the blanket thread or a rogue hair. You go to sleep anyway, because what else can you do? Your mother says it wasn't always like this. When she was younger, the mattress was newer. The house drier and the winters felt gentler somehow. But you suspect she's just remembering it softer, like we all do. Truth is, The bugs were probably there too, smaller maybe, but just as determined. And the worst part? You can never win. You clean, you burn herbs, you smoke the bedding, and still they return. You've heard rumours of people shaving their heads just to be done with it. Of entire villages soaking their clothes in urine, vinegar, or a boiled mixture of herbs and animal fat. None of it sounds pleasant. All of it sounds necessary. You take a moment now to lift your tunic and inspect the waistband. Red welts. Classic. You groan softly and look over at your sister. She's picked a spot behind her ear raw and it's scabbing already. You make a mental note to boil some sage later. Maybe even warm a little lard to make a paste. Not because it'll work necessarily, but because it feels like you're doing something. And sometimes in winter, something is all you've got. The chicken walks across your foot, you jump slightly, then realise you're barefoot. The chicken might have lice too. Great. You sigh and pour a little water from the clay jug into a bowl. It's cold, of course. So cold your fingers go numb the second they touch it, but you splash it onto your face anyway. Maybe that'll help with the crawling feeling under your skin, maybe not. Still, it's better than doing nothing. Your father is by the fire, rubbing his neck. He's spotted a flea in his beard. He curses in Old Church Latin. No one blames him. Eventually the room will warm up enough for another round of delousing attempts. You'll all stand by the fire holding your clothes open like strange scarecrows, hoping the smoke drives away a few more of the enemy. The pig, of course, is completely unfazed. Probably covered in bugs too, but she seems to thrive on it. You glance at her and shake your head. "You lucky thing," you mutter. She grunts in reply. Historical fact. Lice, fleas, and bedbugs were an unavoidable part of medieval life, even among the upper classes. Infestations were common and difficult to eliminate entirely. Quirky fringe fact. Some people in medieval Europe believed that carrying a small bag of crushed emeralds or sapphire could repel lice. Assuming you could afford crushed gemstones, of course. Debate spotlight. Scholars continue to debate the frequency and effectiveness of medieval hygiene practices. While some claim people were far dirtier than we imagine, others argue that regular bathing, smoking, and herbal treatments were more common than often portrayed. You're crouched by the hearth again. Fingers stiff, cheeks flushed from the cold, the morning chores are done, barely, and the light outside has dimmed to that flat, colourless grey that means one thing. The sun's still up, technically, but it's already losing interest in the day. Night will be back soon, and with it, that creeping dread you never quite shake off, because you know what's coming. The long hours, the aching cold, the hunger that never really goes away, and that lovely little game you play every single night. How to trick your body into feeling warm when it absolutely isn't. You reach for one of the clay bricks near the fire. It's smooth and darkened with soot, one of the few things in the house that has a specific job and does it without complaining. You've been rotating these bricks all day, heating them near the coals, then moving them to a corner to cool and back again. The goal is simple. Warmth, borrowed in small, stone-shaped doses. You wrap the brick in a bit of cloth, a threadbare scrap from an old tunic, stained and stiff but still serviceable, and press it between your hands. It's hot, almost too hot, but in the way that makes your skin tingle with relief. You hold it to your chest for a moment, soaking in the radiating heat like a lizard sunbathing on a rock. Then carefully, you tuck it under the blankets on your sleeping spot. One warm patch waiting for you later. The brick is one of several tricks passed down through the years. Your mother swears by boiled stones, ones heated directly in the fire, then wrapped in cloth and placed at the foot of the bed before sleep. They hold their warmth longer than you'd expect. And even when they go cold, they stay dry, unlike a wet rag or animal skin. You've used them for years, placing one at your feet, another at your belly, and, if you're truly lucky, a third near your hands. Some households use pans filled with embers, metal trays slid between the sheets to warm them before bed. You've heard those are dangerous, though. One wrong move, one burning coal spilled in your sleep, and suddenly you're not cold anymore because your mattress is on fire. Still, in some places, they're popular. Anything to push back against the chill. There are also warming bottles made from thick ceramic, filled with boiling water sealed with wax or cork. Too expensive for most folks, but you saw one once when you helped deliver firewood to the healer's cottage. It sat under her blanket like a precious secret, steaming gently. You remember staring at it like it was magic. Bottle of warmth you could carry with you. Unbelievable. Back in your world, it's all about what you can find. Bricks and stones, wrapped iron tools. One time you even used a skillet heated in the fire, then swaddled in layers of cloth and tucked into the straw mattress. It smelled like burned onions for a week, but it worked. Tonight, you have 2 bricks and a slightly warm iron ladle. Not bad. You keep rotating them. Heat, cool, reheat, a slow shuffle rhythm. Your hands are red and raw from the fire's edge, but you don't care. These small rituals matter, not just for the comfort they bring, but for the illusion of control they offer. You can't change the wind howling outside, you can't stop the frost from crawling up the walls, but you can make your bed slightly warmer. That's something. Your younger brother shuffles over, holding a rock with both hands and a hopeful look on his face. You gesture toward the fire. He squats next to you, placing his stone in a clear spot near the embers. You remind him to watch it, not to let it get too hot or it might crack. Last winter one exploded with a loud pop and sent a piece flying into the wall. Nearly hit your cousin. Now there's a rule. No river stones. They hold too much moisture and don't like fire. You both sit in silence for a bit, watching the coals shift and flare. It's oddly peaceful this part of the evening. Before the real cold sets in, before you retreat into layers of wool and pray the mice don't eat through your blanket, you hand your brother one of your bricks. He beams, mumbles a thank you, and scurries off to preheat his corner of the bed. You watch him go, and something inside you warms a little too. Maybe it's pride, or maybe just proximity to the fire. Eventually, you get up and check your bed. The brick you placed earlier has cooled slightly, but still radiates a comforting heat through the straw mattress. You nudge it with your hand, then rearrange the blankets to trap the warmth. You do the same at the foot of the bed, placing the second brick where your feet will go. The ladle you keep for yourself, wrapped in cloth, cradled close like a small metallic pet. You know it won't last all night. The warmth will fade just like it always does. But even an hour of comfort before the deep cold creeps in is worth it. You'll fall asleep easier, you'll shiver less, and with any luck you'll stay asleep long enough to dream of spring. Funny. How much effort goes into such a small thing, heating rocks, rotating them, wrapping them just right. It's a science, no, an art. One born of generations of stubborn, shivering peasants who figured out how to survive with what they had. And when you crawl into bed later, you'll feel it immediately. That one blessed spot, that patch of warmth that says, you tried today. And it helped. It won't chase away the cold entirely, but it'll hold the worst of it at bay, just long enough to let you rest. Historical fact, heated bricks, stones and metal objects were commonly used in medieval households to warm beds, especially among the lower classes who couldn't afford fireplaces and multiple rooms. Quirky fringe fact, some medieval herbalists believed that heating specific stones, like agate or obsidian, and placing them under the bed could prevent nightmares and improve digestion. Why digestion? Who knows? Debate spotlight. Scholars differ on how widespread and systematic these heating methods were. While some believe they were universal among the poor, others argue they were more common in regions with harsher winters or access to particular resources like stone or clay. You're sitting by the fire, legs crossed, slowly untangling a bundle of fabric that's seen more winters than you have. It's wool. Coarse, scratchy, the kind that never feels clean no matter how often you rinse it in the stream. But it's yours, or was, or used to be someone else's before it made its way into your hands. The dye has long faded, but you can still see hints of blue. Woad blue, the kind that stains your fingers and marks you as someone too poor for indigo, but still too proud for plain grey. Textiles are precious here. Every thread matters, every patch, every stitch. In a world where warmth is life and new cloth is rare, fabric is as much survival gear as it is clothing. You learn early how to layer, how to wrap a wool shawl so it blocks the wind, how to double a cloak into a makeshift blanket, how to fold a tunic around your arms at night when your sleeves aren't thick enough. Enough. Tonight you're reworking a piece that was once a dress, then a tunic, then a curtain, and now, with a few more seams and some creative folding, it'll be a sleeping wrap for your younger sister. She's barely 6 and thin as a reed, always cold, always shivering, even with 2 layers on. She needs this more than you do. Besides, Wayne, it's your turn to sleep near the door tonight, where the wind finds every crack in the wood and makes your toes question their will to live. You pull the cloth tighter in your hands and thread your needle through a tear. The motion is automatic, you don't need to look. Your fingers know the path, they have done it 100 times, maybe more. Stitch, pull, knot, repeat. Every household has someone who knows how to repair fabric, and in yours, that someone is you. Wool is your first line of defense in winter. It's heavy, yes, and it smells like wet sheep half the time, but it holds heat like nothing else. You've worn it soaking wet, stiff with frost, even riddled with moth holes, and it still manages to trap warmth against your skin. Linen is cooler, better for underlayers or summer wear, but wool is life. There's a pile of garments by the fire tonight, all needing some kind of attention. A sock with the toe worn clean through, a sleeve half detached from its tunic, a child's shift that has been patched so many times it looks like a quilt. You glance at them all and sigh. You'll get to as many as you can, the rest will wait, or not. That's winter's rhythm. Triage and thread. You run your hand over a strip of old cloak, thick, coarse, dark brown. It used to belong to your uncle. He wore it for years until it frayed at the edges, and one side tore on a nail by the barn. Now, it's been cut down into 3 pieces, one for the dog's bed, one for patching up a blanket, and the last to be sewn into a wrap for your mother's shoulders. Nothing gets thrown away, not ever. Even the smallest scrap gets tucked into a basket for stuffing pillows or binding drafty windows. And the dye, that's another story. You smile faintly, remembering the woad pot bubbling over the summer fire. Your hands stained for days. Woad grows in the nearby hills, a hardy plant with a terrible smell but a gift for colour. You crush the leaves, ferment them, strain the liquid, then dip the fabric in and pray it doesn't come out blotchy. It always does. But the blue is strong even now, even after dozens of washes and a few winters hung over the fire to dry. People trade for woad-dyed cloth. It's not fancy, but it marks the effort. It says you cared. Indigo's reserved for nobles and clerics, but you have your woad, your madder for red, your onion skins for gold. You've seen dresses that look like the sunset and tunics that bloom like moss after rain, all coloured with the earth, stitched by hand and mended 1,000 times. That's the thing. Warmth isn't just fire and bodies and blankets. It's fabric. It's the armour you wrap yourself in each day, then double again at night. It's the scarf pulled over your nose before you go out into the wind, the socks layered 2 at a time, the cap tied under your chin because you heard somewhere that you lose all your heat through your head. You don't know if it's true, but you wear the cap anyway. Tonight, your sleeping outfit will consist of 3 tunics, 2 wool, 1 linen, plus socks, 2 wraps for your legs, and a hood. You've tied an old sash around your waist to keep the layers from riding up, and you've stuffed a bit of sheep's wool under the blanket near your knees to give the illusion of padding. It's not glamorous, but you've learned to judge people not by how they dress during the day, but how well they prepare for bed. That's where the real wisdom shows. You finish the last stitch on your sister's wrap and fold it carefully. She's curled near the fire, already half asleep, her cheeks pink from heat and her feet still bare. You wrap the fabric around her gently, tucking the edges under her small form. She murmurs something incoherent and presses closer to the dog, who doesn't mind sharing. You glance around at the rest of your family. Your mother is rubbing lard into her hands, her version of lotion. Your older brother is twisting rags to stuff into the window crack. Your father is checking the cloak he'll use as a cover tonight, muttering about how the goats chewed one corner last spring. Everyone is preparing in their own quiet way. You return to your own bedroll, wrapping yourself in layers like a moth in its cocoon. You pull the wool tight around your legs, press your back against the wall, and adjust the hood so it covers your ears. It's not enough, it never is, but it's something. And in this life, something often means survival. Historical fact, woad, a blue dye made from a native European plant, was widely used in medieval Europe by peasants and artisans for colouring textiles, as it was cheaper than imported indigo. Quirky fringe fact. In some regions, it was believed that sleeping in red-dyed garments from madja root offered protection against winter illnesses and evil dreams. Debate spotlight. Scholars still discuss how much clothing the average medieval peasant owned. Some argue most had only 1 or 2 sets, while others point to tax records and wills, suggesting larger wardrobes among working families. You lie awake in the darkness, not shivering exactly, but not exactly warm either. The heat from your brick has faded, and the wool blankets feel damp again, like they always do by this hour. The rest of the house is quiet, save for the fire crackling low and the occasional snort from the pig, who seems to be having a particularly vivid dream. The strange part is, you're not tired anymore. You were, your body aches and your mind is fuzzy, but now your eyes are wide open, staring into the black above you. This is what people call the first sleep. You didn't know there was a name for it until someone mentioned it during a festival. After a few too many cups of warm ale, Turns out waking up in the middle of the night for a while, really waking up, sitting up, talking, maybe even doing a little work, isn't strange at all. It's expected. Normal. Human, even. Apparently most folks in the village do the same thing. Sleep for a few hours, wake up for one or two, then drift off into a second sleep until morning. You sit up slowly, letting the blanket fall to your waist. The air is sharp against your skin, not painfully cold, just present, like a thin blade gently pressing against your cheeks and the tip of your nose. The fire glows faintly on the other side of the room, the embers pulsing red in the dark. You can see your mother's shape curled up nearby, the dog curled next to her like a makeshift foot warmer. Your little brother mumbles something in his sleep and turns over, stealing more of the blanket you both share. This middle-of-the-night moment feels private, even though you're still surrounded by people. Everyone is half asleep or somewhere between sleep and dream. And you're just waiting, thinking, letting your thoughts float in the dark like bits of ash from the fire. You've noticed others use this time differently. Your father sometimes gets up to sharpen tools by candlelight. You've seen your older sister pray during these hours, kneeling near the hearth with her shawl over her head, whispering words to saints you've never heard of. Some neighbours even use this time to visit each other. You've heard voices outside before, quiet footsteps on snow, gentle knocks at doors, whispers exchanged in the cold. Not every visit is innocent either. There are stories. You've only ventured out once during this time, last winter, to fetch more firewood. The snow was high and crusted over, crunching underfoot like old bones. The moon lit everything in that strange silver light that makes the world feel colder, sharper. The stars blinked above you like they were keeping watch, and for a brief moment you understood why some people say this is when the veil between the worlds is thinnest. But tonight, you stay inside. You shift your legs out from under the blanket, wincing as the cold nips at your knees. You reach over and grab your second brick, cool now but not icy, and hug it to your chest. It's something to do, something to hold. You rest your chin on it and let your mind drift. This first sleep, second sleep rhythm makes sense in winter. Nights are so long, the sun sets early and rises late. If you tried to sleep straight through, you'd end up lying awake for hours, wasting fuel and sanity. So you break the night in half. Sleep, wake, sleep again. Some call it a watch, especially among shepherds and monks. Others just call it night. There's no word for insomnia in your world. There's just this, waking, breathing, listening. Sometimes you talk during this time. Not loud, not enough to wake the others, just soft conversations with whoever else happens to be awake. Tonight it's your sister, who's sitting near the hearth with a cup of water and the same dazed expression you probably have. She catches your eye and lifts the cup in greeting. You get up, dragging your blanket around your shoulders like a cloak, and shuffle over to join her. You sit on the hearthstone, both of you staring into the embers like they're telling secrets. She speaks first, whispering, "Remember the time the snow came in through the roof?" You nod, and froze the stew while it was still in the pot. You both smile, barely. It wasn't funny then, but it's funny now. That's how it goes. You talk a little more, not about anything big, just scraps of memory, plans for spring, gossip from the last market day. The warmth from the fire seeps into your knees, and for a while the cold recedes. It feels like you're wrapped in a bubble, just the two of you and the quiet flame. Eventually she yawns and pats your shoulder before heading back to bed. You stay a little longer, watching the logs shift and settle. Then you rise, stretch and crawl back under your blanket. Your body fits into the space you left, still warm, still welcoming. The second sleep comes easier than the first. Your body remembers what to do. You exhale slowly, your breath curling in the dark, and feel the thoughts that filled your mind during your watch hour fade away. Outside, the wind has softened. The pig has stopped snoring. The world has settled. At least for now. You close your eyes, and this time the darkness feels like a promise. Historical fact: many medieval Europeans practiced segmented sleep, first sleep and second sleep, with a wakeful period in between, often used for prayer, chores or quiet reflection. Quirky fringe fact: some medieval physicians believed the period between first and second sleep was the optimal time for conception, claiming the body was more relaxed and balanced. Debate spotlight. Modern historians continue to explore whether segmented sleep was universal or more common in certain climates, classes, or religious communities. Evidence suggests it was widespread but not uniform. A cough rumbles through the room, low and wet, and you stir under the layers of wool. Illness isn't polite here. It doesn't wait for spring or for a day when you feel strong. It creeps in with the winter chill, carried on the cold wind, nestled in the damp straw, clinging to your breath and your clothes. One sick person in a household can mean nights filled with worry, days spent nursing them, and the constant gnawing fear that they might not pull through. You've seen it happen before, and you know the stakes. Tonight, it's your little sister who coughs. She shifts beneath her blanket, tugging it up to her chin, and her cheeks are pale despite the firelight. You slide over, careful not to jostle anyone else in the bed. Your hands hover over her shoulders, feeling for heat or cold. She's warm, thankfully, but weak. A small sniffle, a quiet groan, and you tuck the blanket closer, smoothing the folds. Every movement is careful, every motion matters. One wrong touch, one draft from the open window, and she could shiver herself into misery. Sickness changes everything. You've learned this the hard way. The fire has to be hotter, or at least closer. The blankets layered thicker. Rearranged constantly. Extra herbs are scattered near her head. Mint to ease her breathing, lavender to calm restlessness, a bit of wormwood just in case. There's no doctor coming tonight, no healer walking the frozen roads. This is your job now. Nursing through winter isn't glamorous, but it's necessary. You notice that everyone else has shifted slightly in response. Even the pig seems to be aware, moving closer to your sister's side as if it can feel the fragility of her warmth. Livestock and humans both seem to understand instinctively that survival tonight is a communal effort. Every body heat counts, every ember, every breath. You pull your arms around your knees and press yourself against her blanket, not just for the proximity, but for strategy. The more warmth you can share, the better her chances of staying well enough to face morning. Meals matter too. You think about the morning stew, simmered slowly over the hearth, too thin to be satisfying, but thick enough to keep the body fueled. Water is scarce, mostly frozen. The few drops in the jug must be rationed carefully. Enough to moisten food, enough to wash hands if necessary, enough for the sick. There's no luxury here, no flavoured teas, no hot chocolate, just water sometimes warmed, and whatever scraps of food remain. Nutrition and warmth are intertwined. Cold weakens, hunger weakens, sickness exploits weakness. You've learnt this lesson repeatedly, even clothing plays a role. You adjust your sister's shawl around her shoulders, tucking stray folds under her arms, smoothing it over her chest. Each layer is deliberate. Linen for softness, wool for insulation, a spare tunic for thickness. It's a game of temperature chess. Too much and she sweats. Dampness invites chills. Too little and frost settles. You feel every fold, every tangle of thread, and you try to anticipate what the next hour might demand. Outside, the wind presses against the shutters with renewed intensity. It rattles the thatch above, as if testing the house's defences. Snow has drifted against the walls again, forming small mounds where gaps in the foundation allow it in. You've noticed the patterns, how the wind always finds a crack near the floor, how it sneaks under doors if they aren't wedged, how the cold settles like mist around the hearth if the fire dies even slightly. Tonight, you're vigilant. You adjust a bundle of straw at the base of the door, pushing it tight against the gap. Every inch matters. You shift slightly in the bed, careful not to wake the others. Each motion sends tiny vibrations through the mattress, but everyone else is too deep in sleep to notice. You exhale slowly, counting, pacing yourself. It's almost a ritual, this minute tending to the sick, this constant awareness of drafts, this delicate orchestration of warmth. It isn't heroic, it isn't even recognised, but it works. Survival in winter relies on vigilance, adaptation, and patience. Your sister's cough fades into a softer sound. You press a hand against her back, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breathing. Relief settles in for a moment. Not complete relief, it never is, but enough to allow your mind to wander back to the fire, the bricks you tucked under blankets, the layers of wool waiting to be arranged. Everything is a network of strategies. The house, the bedding, the bodies, even the animals. They are all players in this nightly game against cold, fatigue, and illness. You pull your cloak a little tighter around your shoulders, adjusting the folds to trap heat. You glance at the embers, glowing faintly but holding enough promise to stave off the worst of the chill. And you realise something essential. In winter, nursing someone through illness is as much about heat as it is about care. Every layer, every ember, every shared breath counts. Every gesture is a lifeline. Tonight, the cold hasn't won. Not yet. Historical fact, in medieval households, illness was often managed entirely within the family. Winter colds, fevers, and more serious ailments required constant attention from relatives, as professional medical help was rare. Quirky fringe fact, some families placed garlic, iron objects, or charms near the sick in hopes of warding off spirits believed to exacerbate illness. Mixing superstition with practical care. Debate spotlight. Scholars debate how effective home-based care was for winter illnesses. Some argue it prevented complications, while others suggest close quarters and poor hygiene often worsened outcomes. The days of famine winter are slow. Each one stretches longer than the last, weighed down by frost and scarcity. You wake in the pre-dawn, your body stiff and weak from sleeping in layers that are supposed to warm but can only do so much. Even the fire, coaxed alive every evening, can't fully erase the chill that settles in your bones after weeks of thin meals. Hunger gnaws quietly, insistent but restrained. It doesn't scream, it doesn't howl, it simply waits, a constant companion in the shadow of the cold. Breakfast is a muted affair. The stew simmers over the embers, thin and lumpy, mostly root vegetables. You stir it carefully, rationing every drop. There isn't enough for everyone to be fully sated, but enough to carry you to the next fire or the next chore. Every spoonful is a strategic decision. You glance around at the others. Your father sharpens a knife while keeping one eye on the fire. Your mother slices a bit of stale bread into the pot, and your siblings pull on whatever scraps of cloth they've layered around themselves, trying to trap warmth. You all move slowly like shadows in a dim hall, careful not to expend unnecessary energy. The cold outside is relentless. Snow drifts against the walls, forming small dunes where gaps in the foundation allow it to sneak in. Every doorframe, every crack in the floor, every window, stuffed with cloth, patched with parchment or layered with old tunics, becomes a front in a quiet, ongoing battle. You walk across the rush-covered floor, checking each draft, pushing straw into gaps, rearranging rags. Each small adjustment is a small victory. It doesn't make the world warmer, but it keeps it tolerable, and that's enough. Ooh. Hunger is strategic too. Every bit of food is measured, divided, calculated to keep the family alive. Some of it is hidden away, dried beans, a few root vegetables buried under straw to prevent freezing. You've learned to ration carefully. Even small indulgences, half a loaf of bread shared secretly, are weighed for risk. Too much eaten at once, and there's nothing left for later. Food in winter is more than sustenance. It's planning, negotiation, and survival. You notice how the cold shapes the day. Tasks are minimized. Movement is deliberate. Chores are done in bursts to conserve energy and warmth. Someone hauls firewood quickly. Another tends the pig that sleeps inside for survival. Children run short distances and curl up again, their small bodies desperate for shared heat. The rhythm of life is dictated by temperature, not sunlight, not desire. You eat quickly, move quickly, and conserve your strength. Sometimes the winter feels like it is conspiring against you. Frost creeps under doors even when they are wedged tight. Icicles grow along the eaves and threaten to break with the slightest touch. And the wind whistles through every slat and seam, reminding you that the world outside is alive and merciless. You press your hands to the fire, rub your arms, and plan your next move, always conscious of conserving warmth. Still, there are moments of small comfort. Steam rising from the stew fills the air, carrying its earthy scent to every corner. The brick you tucked into the blankets the night before still radiates a small but persistent heat. Your sister curls closer to the dog, drawing its warmth around her like a small shield. The goat shifts near the hearth, providing yet another patch of body heat. Every layer of fabric, every living being, every ember counts in this winter equation. Illness and weakness lurk, always close behind hunger and frost. One bad night can leave someone too weak to rise, forcing the rest of the family to compensate. You've learned to watch each other constantly, noting who shivers, who coughs, who lingers too long near the fire. Every observation matters. In this season, awareness is survival. Even the smallest lapse, forgetting to rotate a brick, failing to tuck a blanket, can have consequences. The outside world seems endless in its cold. You can see the neighbouring cottages, faint trails of smoke rising from their chimneys, little markers of the survival in a frozen landscape. Everyone is doing the same delicate dance, rationing heat, food and energy. Each household a miniature fortress against winter's relentlessness. And within your own walls, you keep your small domain secure. managing the fire, rotating warming stones, adjusting blankets, and keeping a watchful eye on the week. By mid-morning, the body's rhythms settle into a careful balance between warmth and exhaustion. You eat, move and sit, always conscious of conserving heat. Each action is measured, each decision deliberate. There's no room for waste, no space for unnecessary exertion. Even breathing feels tactical. You exhale softly lest the warm air escape too quickly. Survival is constant. It doesn't end when you sleep, or when you eat, or when you feed the animals. It is every breath, every movement, every layered fold of wool. Even amid scarcity, there are tiny victories. A brick still hot from the morning fire. A handful of herbs to add a faint scent of life to the room. The warmth of your sister pressed against your side. The pig snoring steadily, the goat curled near your feet. These are the moments that remind you why you endure. Winter is cruel, but together you find pockets of heat, small islands of comfort that carry you through until the night returns. Historical fact, during severe winter famines, medieval families often relied on minimal or rationed meals and careful heat management to survive, prioritizing the weakest family members first. Quirky fringe fact, some medieval peasants carried warmed stones wrapped in cloth throughout the day as portable heat sources, even when working outside. Debate spotlight. Scholars continue to discuss how much winter famine truly affected survival rates. Some evidence suggests entire regions survived on barely enough to stave off starvation, while others argue communal strategies and rationing mitigated most deaths. Life in the Lord's warm hall feels almost unreal compared to your cramped, freezing cottage. You've been there only a few times, usually during market trips or special village visits, and each experience lingers in memory like a half-remembered dream. The walls are thick, yes, but unlike your stone and thatch home, they're polished and lined with tapestries that hang heavy, insulating both heat and sound. The floor is smooth and slightly springy, wood polished to a shine, unlike the packed earth of your own home that gathers cold like a sponge. Even the air is different. It smells faintly of incense, wood smoke and cooking spices, instead of the overwhelming mix of smoke, straw and livestock that dominates your cottage. The hearth is enormous. A roaring fire dominates the centre of the hall, large enough to light the room and warm every body in it. You notice luxury immediately. Logs stacked neatly, almost like an art installation, and a tray of coals nearby to add without effort. There's no careful rotation of bricks or heated stones here. The fire is constant, powerful, controlled. Standing near it, you feel almost dizzy at the sensation of warmth, like breathing in a rare and precious thing. Beds in the Lord's Hall are a revelation. They're elevated, carved from polished wood, and layered with thick feather mattresses that make the straw in your cottage feel medieval, even by your own standards. You can lie down without contorting your body to avoid the lumps, and the blankets are soft, heavy and dry. Feathers, not straw, cradle you. Curtains of rich fabric hang around the bed to trap heat, and to provide a little privacy, though in practice everyone still knows who is in each bed. You lie down once and realise, almost with disbelief, that warmth can feel effortless. No heated stones, no layering beyond comfort, no constant worry about drafts. You press your hand into the mattress and feel the difference. The servants and attendants bustle quietly. They tend the fire, refill warming pans, and ensure the hall is organised without disturbing the occupants. You notice the efficiency. Heat, food, clothing, all meticulously managed. The contrast is staggering. Back home, your mother has to juggle every role: cook, fire tender, nurse, and even fashioner of insulation using scraps of fabric. Here, every task is handled by someone assigned specifically to it, with care and precision. The luxury is dizzying yet comforting. Food in the hall is abundant. While your home survives on rationed stew, bread, and whatever root vegetables can be spared, the Lord's table is laden with meat, fresh bread, butter, and cheese. Spices, sometimes imported, add flavour to dishes that would otherwise be bland. Ale flows freely, often warmed to help stave off winter chill. It's not just survival here, it's pleasure. You watch a servant ladle soup into bowls without the careful measurement you're used to. Portions are generous. Hunger is optional, not mandatory. You notice the tactile details too. The floors aren't just smooth, they're polished to prevent the accumulation of frost indoors. Tapestries hang heavy, insulating the walls. The windows are glazed, letting in light without freezing the room. Even the doors are well sealed. Unlike the gaps and drafts in your home, everything is designed to maintain heat with minimal effort. In your cottage, warmth is a struggle. Here, it feels almost effortless. The family beds are large enough for multiple members to sleep together without discomfort. Unlike your cramped, shared straw mattress, here everyone has a personal corner, layered with linens and pillows. Curtains can be drawn to trap heat, and servants adjust the blankets while you sleep. Even the floor beneath your feet is heated subtly by the large hearth, radiating warmth throughout the room. For the first time, you understand what it means to live in winter without constant vigilance. But it isn't perfect. There's still debate among the nobles about heat management. Some insist on keeping the fires roaring all night, while others argue for lower embers to prevent smoke and conserve wood. Even here, winter requires compromise and foresight. The difference is simply that they have resources and personnel to implement strategies, rather than relying entirely on ingenuity and shared body heat. Despite the comfort, there's an odd sense of tension. Guests and servants move quietly, always aware of their place. Heat is abundant, but hierarchy is ever present. You feel warmth and privilege, but also a strange weight. The luxury is palpable precisely because it's controlled, parcelled, and never entirely yours. You compare it silently to the free but bare warmth of your cottage, where survival is a joint effort and no one can hide from responsibility. By the time you leave the hall, your skin tingles from the abundance of warmth, your mind buzzing from the contrast. You think of your own fire, your own bricks, your own lumpy mattress, and your layered wool, and a strange appreciation settles in. The Lord's Hall may have warmth without effort, but your home has warmth earned. Every night survived in winter, every brick rotated, every blanket tucked, is a testament to resourcefulness and resilience that no tapestry can replicate. Historical fact: noble and wealthy households often had glazed windows, thick tapestries, and large, elevated beds with feather mattresses, creating a warm and comfortable environment far beyond that of peasant homes. Quirky fringe fact: some lords placed warming pans, metal dishes filled with embers, directly into feather beds at night to preheat them, creating an early version of a heated mattress. Debate spotlight. Scholars debate whether such luxurious heat management was widespread in urban merchant houses or largely confined to rural nobility. Evidence suggests substantial variation depending on wealth, region, and winter severity. Monks have a different relationship with winter altogether. You've walked past monasteries and abbeys during the season and noticed the distinct quiet of those places, even compared to the rest of the village. Their cells are small, often just enough room for a bed, a writing desk, and a few personal items. The walls are stone, bare and cold, and there's just no hearth in most individual rooms. Heat is scarce, rationed and communal, with only the main hall offering warmth from a central fire. Winter here isn't a luxury, it's a test of endurance, discipline and faith. Every shiver is a reminder that comfort is secondary to spiritual goals. You've seen the monks in their winter habits: thin wool robes, sometimes layered, sometimes not, with simple caps to retain what little heat their bodies can conserve. They sleep close to the floor on straw-filled mattresses or mats. No feathers, no extra blankets, no heated bricks. You realize quickly that the discipline of monastic life extends beyond prayer and fasting. It extends into every physical experience, including enduring the bitter cold. Even when everyone in the village shivers, monks often sleep in near silence, training themselves to tolerate discomfort as a form of spiritual practice. The daily rhythm of monks in winter is rigorous. Vigils in the middle of the night are required. Their first sleep may be shorter or entirely eliminated in favour of prayer. They rise in darkness, hands folded, voices low, performing rituals while their bodies crave warmth. You imagine what it's like to be awake in that still, cold cell, the stone biting into your back, the floor hard and unyielding. You'd shiver at first, then numb yourself with repetition. Somehow they manage to function, work and pray with a focus born of necessity. Survival is intertwined with devotion, and comfort is considered a distraction. Heating the spaces they occupy is communal. The main hall has a large hearth, often used for cooking as well as warmth. Water for bathing is rare, and rooms are ventilated minimally to avoid smoke, so the chill is always present. You notice how every small action is calculated. Movement near the fire, layering of robes, huddling with fellow monks during the coldest nights. Even the rituals have a functional element, keeping the body slightly active to maintain warmth without wasting energy. Cold and discipline coexist, shaping each moment. Their sleeping arrangements are deliberately austere. Beds are simple wooden frames, straw-filled mattresses, and a thin blanket if one is available. Even the higher-ranking monks rarely enjoy luxury. Warmth is earned through shared proximity, thick robes, and strict adherence to schedules. Some monasteries enforced vigils in the middle of the night, where one monk would remain awake by the fire, watching over the others and reciting prayers. In that silence, winter feels both harsher and strangely comforting, a structure imposed on an otherwise uncontrollable season. Even clothing follows rules. Multiple robes are not always permitted. A monk may wear 1 or 2 layers, relying on physical activity, proximity to others, and sheer tolerance to survive. Caps and hoods retain heat, as do gloves when available, but nothing compares to the layered blankets of peasant homes or the feathered luxury of noble beds. You realise how profoundly temperature influenced spiritual practice. Cold wasn't merely endured, it was a tool for discipline, humility, and self-control. You notice the contrast to your home. In your cottage, survival is communal but practical. Each layer, each heated brick, each shared blanket is a calculated move to stay alive. In the monastery, warmth is intertwined with ritual and endurance. Cold becomes moral instruction. You imagine lying awake in the straw, counting breaths and murmuring prayers, your body rigid but your mind alert. Discipline replaces instinct. Necessity is moralized. You wonder how often monks actually sleep through the night versus sitting in silent vigil, listening to wind and snow. Despite the austerity, winter has moments of beauty in monastic life. Sunlight filtering through high, small windows casts pale lines across stone floors. Frost patterns on exterior walls gleam like etched glass. The quiet amplifies sounds. Steps on stone, the crackle of the fire in the hall, a soft hymn rising in the distance. In these moments, cold is both a challenge and a canvas, shaping the senses and sharpening awareness. You can see why some monks speak of winter as a season for reflection, even if it's brutally uncomfortable. Still, illness or weakness in the monastery carries consequences. A monk too cold or undernourished can't pray effectively, work efficiently, or maintain discipline. There's no separate warmth for the sick. The body must endure, often aided only by minimal care from peers. You think about how differently this approach treats vulnerability compared to your home, where proximity, heated bricks, and layered blankets are practical tools to preserve life, not moral tests. By evening, the halls are filled with low murmurs of prayer and quiet movement near the fire. Straw mattresses are arranged, robes layered, and a careful watch over coals begins. The cold hasn't gone away, it never does, but you realise that for the monks, enduring winter isn't just survival, it's a practice, a lesson, a way to cultivate patience and inner fortitude. Their winter nights are long, still, and deeply intentional. Historical fact: monastic cells were often unheated in winter, relying on layered wool robes, communal proximity, and strict routines to endure harsh cold. Quirky fringe fact: some monks believed that sleeping on cold floors or with minimal blankets purified the body and soul, strengthening spiritual resilience. Debate spotlight: historians continue to examine how rigorous winter routines in monastic life affected health and longevity, with some arguing that austerity had both beneficial discipline and detrimental physical consequences. Superstition and ritual weave themselves into the chill of medieval nights like another layer of insulation, though in a far less practical sense. You've noticed it in your own family and the village around you. Charms tucked under pillows, herbs hung over beds, tiny bottles filled with curious mixtures of nails, hair, and sometimes coins. They call them witch bottles or protective charms, designed to ward off evil spirits, illness, or curses that might enter while the household sleeps. You're not entirely sure you believe in them, but you also don't argue when your mother presses one into your hand before bed, muttering something under her breath. "Better safe than sorry," she says, and you tuck it under your pillow without looking. The rituals are as practical as they are mystical. Herbs like rosemary, sage, or lavender are stuffed into pillows or hung near windows to mask odours, repel pests, or simply provide a comforting scent. Some believe that night spirits can enter through cold air, gaps in walls, or even windows, and that a sprinkling of salt, iron, or garlic can deter them. You've seen families use iron horseshoes above doors or bury small charms in the hearth. These are the superstitions of necessity, a psychological buffer against fear, the cold and the unknown. In the dead of night, when the wind rattles the shutters and the fire flickers low, it feels sensible to cling to something. Even livestock isn't exempt. Some believe that animals themselves can ward off spirits if positioned correctly. Pigs near the hearth, dogs at the doorway, chickens tucked beneath benches. You laugh quietly to yourself, imagining a goat strategically defending the family from witches. But then you notice the warmth radiating from the pig curled at your feet and decide it may as well serve dual purposes: survival and supernatural defense. There's a performative element to the rituals. You've watched your father scatter herbs at night, hum a low chant, then inspect the hearth for cracks. Your mother whispers prayers over the children before sleep, tracing small crosses in the air or against their foreheads. Even your siblings participate in their own small ways, crossing themselves, adjusting a charm or pressing a small coin into a pocket. The actions are repeated nightly, year after year, passed down like survival strategies disguised as folklore. Sometimes the logic is tangible. You've noticed that after scattering herbs or adjusting charms, the pests in the bed seem marginally less aggressive, though that may be coincidence, or the fact that you've shaken and aired the bedding. Sometimes the charms sit untouched for months, yet the habit persists. There's comfort in ritual. There's warmth, even if metaphorical. Stories circulate in the village about what happens when charms fail. Nights when animals are restless, when sickness strikes, when the fire dies or someone wakes to find a strange draught. People whisper of witches, spirits, or curses, always cautious about explaining the unexplainable. Some villagers believe the effectiveness of these rituals depends on faith. If you do it half-heartedly, the protections fail. Skeptics laugh quietly, noting that the most pious houses still suffer frostbite, hunger, and illness. But the superstition persists because up in the dark, fear is as real as frost. You've also noticed regional differences. Some communities favour a small iron nail in a bottle of water. Others string garlic over the bedposts. Others bury charms in the floor near the hearth. The intent is the same: preserve life, maintain warmth, and prevent harm from forces beyond control. In winter, these rituals create a rhythm to the night, a sense of order where otherwise there is only cold, darkness, and uncertainty. Even monks aren't immune. You've heard tales of abbeys where small charms or protective herbs are used alongside prayer, blending faith and superstition. The difference is that in monastic settings, these practices are structured and codified, integrated into routines of prayer and vigilance. In peasant homes, superstition is improvisational, shaped by necessity, passed down through observation, gossip, and trial and error. For you, the charms serve another purpose entirely: a psychological shield. Lying in bed with the wind rattling the shutters, the fire reduced to glowing coals, you feel the cold pressing in from every angle. The charm under your pillow, the herbs at the windows, the coin in your pocket, they make the cold seem less absolute, more negotiable. They don't physically warm you, but they steady your mind. You know you're doing everything in your power, tangible and intangible, to survive the night. And when you drift towards sleep, the charms, the herbs, the rituals, all of them offer one small, undeniable gift: reassurance. In a world where frost bites, hunger persists, and illness looms, reassurance is warmth. Historical fact: medieval families often used witch bottles or protective charms placed near beds or hearths, intended to ward off evil spirits or misfortune during long, harsh winters. Quirky fringe fact: some bottles contained human hair, nails, and sharp objects, believed to trap or repel malevolent entities, combining superstition with tangible household objects. Debate spotlight. Scholars debate how widespread and sincere these protective rituals were. Some argue they were deeply held beliefs, while others suggest they served mainly psychological or symbolic purposes. The idea of hibernation has always fascinated you, especially in the depth of winter, when the nights stretch endlessly and the frost presses against every corner of the house. You've heard tales, whispered around fires, of people supposedly sleeping through the coldest months, curling up in a pile of straw swaddled in layers of wool and not waking until spring. At first it sounds miraculous, even enviable. Imagine avoiding the bitter winds, the hunger pangs, the endless rotation of bricks and firewood. A full season of warmth, uninterrupted by chores or discomfort. It's almost a fantasy, but the reality, you quickly realise, is far less appealing. For one, the human body simply isn't designed for true hibernation. Even if you layered yourself in every scrap of cloth you could find, packed straw around your body, and insulated yourself against the draftiest corners, the cold would seep in. Frostbite would claim extremities long before spring arrived. Your breath would fog continuously, and the slightest movement would release heat into the surrounding straw, making the dream of sleeping through winter impossible to maintain. Bodies require sustenance, hydration, and more than anything, a rhythm of activity to survive. Even monks and hermits, disciplined in their routines, cannot escape the season entirely. Still, there are documented instances of extreme winter practices. Some villagers intentionally minimize movement and activity to conserve energy, curling up for long stretches and surviving on minimal rations. Farmers in particularly harsh northern regions occasionally reported nights or even days of prolonged rest, often accompanied by a diet of preserved grains or dried meat. These periods were less about dreaming through the snow and more about conserving precious calories during the dead of winter. The term hibernation is therefore misleading. It's not sleep in the full sense, but strategic rest, calculated to balance energy expenditure and survival. In practice, such attempts were perilous. A single miscalculation, a drafty corner, a wet blanket, or an empty stomach could result in hypothermia. Families often intervened, rousing one another to stoke fires, feed children, and rotate positions in bed. Even the most disciplined hibernators could not survive entirely in isolation. Communal warmth, body heat, and tending to the fire were essential, which explains why the stories you've heard are probably exaggerated or romanticized over time. Still, the legend persists. People like the idea of sleeping through misery, even if only in their imaginations. You watch the fire flicker and think about your own winter nights, the bricks, the layers of wool, the animals tucked in around the edges of the room. They are your version of hibernation, a controlled attempt to survive the season with as much warmth and minimal energy loss as possible. You imagine curling into that bundle, closing your eyes, and letting hours pass without moving while the pig snuffles softly nearby and your sister clings to her blanket like a talisman. For a moment it feels like magic, warmth retained without conscious effort. But you know the truth. Winter cannot be fully escaped. You can only endure it strategically, hour by hour. Even the monks, disciplined and prayerful, cannot fully suspend the rhythms of life. Vigils, chores, and fasting demand movement. Their cells are small, cold, and minimally insulated, requiring awareness and adaptation at all times. The legend of uninterrupted sleep in winter exists more as a story to inspire endurance than as a practical reality. It tells of human resilience, the desire to overcome hardship, and the longing for a reprieve from cold and hunger. For you, the lesson is clear. Survival is measured not in uninterrupted sleep, but in careful planning, shared warmth, and attention to the smallest details. Sometimes during your first or second sleep you lie awake and imagine the possibilities. Could a human truly hibernate like a bear? Could you, wrapped in layers of wool, insulated by straw, lie still for weeks and wake with the world transformed? Your mind wanders, tempered by the practical knowledge. The cold always finds its way in, hunger always calls, and even if your body could endure the frost, the mind would grow restless. True hibernation, you conclude, is not for humans. It is a dream, a metaphor for survival rather than a feasible strategy. But the dream has its value. It inspires techniques: layering clothing, insulating the bed, piling blankets, tucking in warmed stones. Every method used to sleep through winter is rooted in ingenuity, experimentation, and experience. And even if no one ever truly hibernates, the rituals, strategies, and adjustments developed in pursuit of that dream become tools for endurance. That's why tales of winter sleepers persist. They are less about literal truth and more about survival wisdom encoded in story. Historical fact: true hibernation is physiologically impossible for humans, though medieval accounts often describe prolonged winter rest or minimal activity as sleeping through winter. Quirky fringe fact: some northern European communities reportedly encourage children to remain curled in straw beds for extended periods during severe cold, believing minimal movement preserved life energy. Debate spotlight: scholars debate whether historical hibernation accounts reflect literal practices, exaggeration, or a symbolic way of describing energy conservation during harsh winters. Ale and other warm drinks play a surprisingly vital role in medieval winter survival, far beyond their role as simple indulgences. You've seen it in your own household. When the frost bites harder than usual and the night stretches endlessly, a small mug of ale or cider provides more than just flavour. It's a psychological boost, a minor source of warmth, and for adults, a way to relax muscles stiff from sleeping in lumpy straw and layered wool. The alcohol in the drink increases blood flow near the skin, creating a temporary sensation of warmth, though it also lowers core temperature, a dangerous trade-off if overused. Still, in moderation, it's a time-tested method to get through particularly brutal nights. Children occasionally sip watered-down ale, though never enough to intoxicate. It's less about the alcohol for them and more about the comfort of a warm liquid sliding down a cold throat. Even the pigs in the corner seem to notice when a small bowl of slightly fermented grains is set out as part of the household routine, nudging it gently with their noses before settling back into sleep. Warmth, hydration, and slight caloric intake, small elements that make a tangible difference when every degree counts. You've learned to prepare such drinks carefully. Water is often barely above freezing, and food-safe methods of heating are rudimentary. Clay pots are set directly over embers, not flames, so the liquid warms slowly without boiling over. Herbs may be added, both for taste and superstition. Rosemary, thyme, or even a pinch of sage, all believed to aid digestion, fend off illness, or simply make the bitter liquid more palatable. The aroma rises, filling the cottage with a scent both medicinal and comforting. Ale isn't the only option. Grains are steeped in hot water to make gruel, root vegetables are boiled to soften them and release nutrients, and occasionally small amounts of milk are warmed if available. Every warmth-providing ritual counts. The family rotates these drinks among themselves, making sure the youngest, the weakest, or the sickest receive the first portions. Even a few sips can invigorate hands, ease shivering, and encourage circulation through stiff muscles. And while the effect on core temperature is temporary, the psychological impact is profound. A warm drink, held carefully in mittened hands, creates a sensation of control in a world dominated by the whims of frost, wind, and winter darkness. It's a small victory, yet enough to give courage for another hour of tending the fire, checking animals, or rearranging blankets. Survival is built from these incremental gains, a brick here, a blanket tucked there, a sip of warmed ale for the soul and body alike. Ale also provides calories, more than you might imagine. When winter rations are meagre, a small mug offers not just liquid warmth, but sustenance. Even a weekly brewed ale can supply enough carbohydrate to fuel muscles and keep blood flowing, reducing the risk of frostbite or fatigue. Families measure portions carefully. Too much and the drinker risks intoxication, which in winter is dangerous. Too little and the benefits are negligible. Balance is everything. You remember one particularly bitter night when the wind roared through the shutters and snow drifted in under the door. Everyone huddled together, shivering despite layers of wool and straw. Your mother brought out the small keg of weak ale, heated gently near the coals. One sip at a time it circulated through the family. You felt the warmth creep up your arms and into your chest, a slow, comforting glow. The pig even lifted its head to sniff at the cup, as if to acknowledge the magic of fermented warmth. That night you slept better than usual, feeling the ale's comfort extend beyond mere temperature. Of course, scholars debate the real efficacy of warm alcohol for winter survival. Some argue it's largely symbolic, a psychological crutch. Others contend that small doses genuinely improved circulation and morale, which could make the difference between shivering through the night and enduring it. Either way, it became a ritual, integrated into household routines, repeated nightly when conditions demanded. You sip your own mug now, feeling the liquid crawl down your throat, carrying warmth into your chest. It doesn't remove the cold entirely, nothing can, but it eases the tension in your shoulders, quiets the nagging ache in your knees, and reminds you that survival is always a combination of physical strategies and psychological reassurance. One sip at a time, winter becomes just a little more bearable. Historical fact, medieval households often consumed warm ale, cider, or weak beer during winter months, as both nutrition and minor warmth, particularly when food rations were minimal. Quirky fringe fact, some villagers believed that drinking ale warmed not just the body, but also protected against evil spirits entering through the night air. Debate spotlight. Scholars debate the physiological benefits of warm alcohol in cold climates. Some evidence suggests moderate consumption aids circulation, while excessive intake increases the risk of hypothermia. Night chores aren't glamorous. They never were, and you know better than to expect otherwise. In the dead of winter, the fire needs tending constantly. The pigs, chickens, and goats must be checked to ensure they remain safe and warm. Doors and shutters need a final inspection to prevent drafts. Every movement feels amplified in the dark, cold room, as if every breath and shuffle announces your presence to the frost. You move deliberately, almost silently, carrying out a small basket of firewood, a handful of straw, and a measure of herbs for the bedding. The choreography is practiced and precise, honed over years of winter nights where a single misstep could cost warmth or comfort. The hearth is the first priority. You poke at the coals, coaxing sparks to life, and arrange a small log to keep the embers alive for the hours to come. Fire isn't just heat, it's survival. Its light reveals the faint glint of frost along the window edges, and the slight tremor in the straw mattresses, evidence of the night's chill still lingering. You shuffle through the room, careful to avoid elbows, blankets, and the occasional animal sprawled inconveniently in your path. Each chore is deliberate. Too fast, and you risk misplacing a brick or spilling a pan. Too slow, and the cold seeps in. The animals require attention next. The pig grunts as you nudge her into a slightly better position near the hearth. Chickens rustle beneath the bench, their warmth marginally contributing to the room's temperature. The goat, as always, occupies no designated space and moves according to whim, nudging blankets and disrupting your careful arrangements. You reposition each animal, adding a few handfuls of straw beneath them for insulation, making small adjustments that collectively make a significant difference. Even the smallest creature matters in winter, their body heat shared among the family as a natural supplement to the fire. You check the windows and doors, pressing rags and scraps of fabric into the smallest cracks. Drafts are relentless. Snow has drifted slightly against the threshold, and you wedge a chunk of straw to block it. Every patching action is a negotiation with the cold. Each success is temporary but critical. You've learnt that survival depends on persistence, not perfection. Even when the wind howls like a living thing outside, a well-placed draft stopper, a tightened shutter, or an extra blanket can tilt the night in your favour. Next, you move to the bedding. Bricks are rotated, heated, and tucked back into the straw mattress or blanket layers. A small bundle of herbs is sprinkled near the head of the bed. These rituals are part superstition, part practicality. The warmth of the bricks and the scent of herbs both comfort the body and steady the mind. The mattress is lumpy, straw shifting under the weight of sleepers, but your careful adjustments maximize comfort for everyone, particularly the youngest or weakest. These nightly chores may seem minor, but they represent the difference between surviving and succumbing to the cold. You pause to survey the room. Everyone is mostly asleep, bodies huddled under blankets and cloaks, breathing fogging faintly in the dim glow of embers. The pig has settled again near the hearth. The goat lies with its head resting against a pile of straw. The children curl closer together, sharing warmth as instinct dictates. The fire crackles softly, an auditory reminder of the tenuous line between comfort and frost. You feel a sense of quiet accomplishment. It's small, but in winter, small victories matter immensely. Even with experience, vigilance is key. You know the rhythm of the night, when the fire dies down, when the youngest shifts in their sleep, when the wind finds a new crack in the wall. Your body moves through these tasks with a practiced awareness, every motion intentional. Winter in a medieval household is a continuous ballet of adjustments, a ceaseless negotiation with temperature, draft, and fatigue. Nothing is permanent, but everything counts. You return to your own space, brushing straw from your sleeves. The layers of wool, blankets, and bricks are readjusted. The room feels slightly warmer. You sink back into your spot, feeling the residual heat from the fire and animals. The chores are done for now. The room settles into silence once more, punctuated only by the occasional snort, grunt, or creak. Your body relaxes, knowing you've done what you can to maintain warmth for yourself and the family. In this way, survival is both physical and mental. Winter is relentless, but careful attention, shared warmth, and repeated effort create moments of comfort. The night remains long, but you have tools, rituals, and strategies to navigate it. You close your eyes, aware that tomorrow will demand the same vigilance, but for now, you allow yourself the brief luxury of rest. Historical fact: peasant families often divided winter night chores among members to maintain fire, bedding, and animals, crucial for survival during extended cold spells. Quirky fringe fact: some medieval households tied small bells to goats or pigs indoors to alert sleepers if animals moved into unsafe areas, combining practicality with a touch of superstition. Debate spotlight: Scholars continue to discuss the extent of night vigilance in medieval homes, with some suggesting constant monitoring was common, while others argue that families relied heavily on shared body heat and instinctual adjustments. Evening descends with its familiar chill creeping in under doors and through window cracks despite your careful preparations. The world outside seems quieter, though only superficially. The wind whistles over the frozen fields, rattling shutters and driving loose snow against the walls. You can hear it in the silence between the flickers of firelight. Inside, every breath, shuffle, and whisper feels amplified. Winter nights are long and unforgiving, but this is where survival takes shape, not in heroics, but in small, deliberate acts repeated night after night. You check the fire first, as always. The coals are faintly glowing, not enough for full warmth, but enough to reignite with a single log. You poke gently, coaxing the embers, feeling the heat slowly radiate back into your fingers and chest. The room already feels slightly more alive, though still cold by modern standards. Even the bricks tucked into blankets are only warm enough to provide comfort near the skin, not to banish the chill entirely. You've learned to treat warmth as something borrowed and finite, not permanent. Next, you inspect the bedding. Bricks are rotated carefully, shifting them to places where they can radiate heat efficiently. You adjust the layers of wool, tucking edges under and between sleepers to minimize gaps where cold could sneak in. The straw mattress is beaten lightly, making the lumps less pronounced, and you smooth blankets where they've slipped during the day. Every adjustment is strategic. One misstep, one corner left untucked, and the cold finds a path. You think about your sister, sleeping lightly nearby. She relies entirely on these small interventions. Without them, she would wake shivering, the cold gnawing at her tiny frame. The animals get attention next. The pig snuffles softly near the hearth, and you rearrange a few handfuls of straw beneath her to ensure she remains insulated. The chickens huddle under benches, feet tucked beneath feathers, and you prod them gently to keep them within a warm cluster. The goat stretches, yawns, and moves as it pleases, but you manage to redirect it so it doesn't disrupt a carefully arranged blanket pile. Each animal contributes to warmth indirectly, and you treat their positions as carefully as you do the fire or the bricks. You scatter a few herbs near the pillows, a mix of sage, lavender, and rosemary, to keep pests at bay and provide a comforting aroma. Perhaps it works partially in superstition, partially in reality. In a world with lice, fleas, and bedbugs lurking in straw mattresses, every small precaution counts. Some nights you've even placed tiny iron objects near the bedding, echoing old beliefs that they repel evil spirits. Logic and ritual intertwine seamlessly in winter. A pinch of rosemary is both smell and shield. A brick wrapped in cloth is both heat and reassurance. Food is a consideration even now. Though the main meal has passed, the memory of hunger lingers. You rationed breakfast and supplemented it with a small portion of warm ale earlier, enough to stave off immediate weakness. Every calorie counts, every sip or morsel measured. Winter is an economy of energy. You expend only what is necessary to survive and conserve the rest for the long night ahead. You pause and take a deep breath, letting the heat of the fire fill your chest for a moment. The room feels slightly more cohesive now, animals positioned, bricks radiating, blankets adjusted, herbs scattered, coals glowing. The tasks are complete for the moment, but the vigilance remains. Cold is never fully vanquished. It lingers, a constant reminder that winter is both a season and a relentless adversary. Even in the stillness you are aware of the subtle movements. A sibling shifts under their blanket, the pig's ears twitch, the goat grumbles softly. You listen to the quiet, appreciating that these noises are signs of life, warmth, and survival. In this world, such small signals are meaningful. The night stretches on, but the room is slightly fortified against it. You adjust your hood, tuck the blanket around your knees, and feel the residual heat from your careful arrangements seep slowly back into your body. This is winter survival distilled into routine. Fire tended, bricks rotated, bedding managed, animals positioned, herbs scattered, and superstition acknowledged. It's not glamorous, but it works. In these small deliberate motions, you claim a measure of control over the relentless season. Every adjustment, every decision, every rotation of warmth is a victory, however minor, against frost, darkness, and the long, unyielding night. You settle into your place, ready to endure, ready to repeat the cycle for another hours-long stretch until dawn. Historical fact. Medieval peasants used herbs, small iron objects, and careful bedding arrangements as both practical and ritual measures to protect themselves and their homes from pests, cold, and misfortune. Quirky fringe fact: some families placed coins or charms inside bedding to trap evil spirits or bring good fortune, a blend of superstition and psychological reassurance. Debate spotlight. Scholars discuss whether these protective measures were primarily symbolic, practical, or a mixture of both, with evidence suggesting that ritual often reinforced survival strategies. Word count: 1003. Morning arrives slowly, reluctant as ever, with grey light leaking through the patched windows. It isn't bright or warm, just enough to reveal frost patterns along the edges and the faint outline of snow piled against the walls. You stir under your layers of woolen blankets, careful not to wake the siblings huddled near you. The pig snuffles softly, the goat shifts lazily, and the chickens rustle beneath the bench. Everything feels simultaneously peaceful and tense, the calm of a house that has survived another night, and the ever-present awareness that winter is relentless, unyielding, and always poised to strike back. The first task is always the fire. You roll to the edge of the bed and lift one brick, still radiating a faint warmth, and move toward the hearth. Coals glow faintly in the ashes, and you coax them to life, adding a small log to ensure the room will be livable for the next few hours. The process is methodical: poke, rearrange, blow gently, add fuel. Each ember coaxed into life is a victory, a small rebellion against the cold that tries to dominate everything. You pause to breathe in the smoky warmth, appreciating how life and survival revolve around these small repetitive rituals. Next comes the inspection of bedding and blankets. Bricks are rotated, and any sagging or shifting straw is corrected. You smooth the blankets, ensuring that gaps are minimized, that no one's foot or shoulder is left exposed to the lingering chill. The layers are thick and scratchy, but they are the best defense against frost creeping through the floor and walls. You glance over at your sister, still curled under her wrap, and tug a fold closer to cover her shoulders. Her small face is calm in sleep, and you feel the quiet satisfaction of having protected her through the night. Animals, of course, require attention. The pig shifts again, nudging the straw into a better position. The goat stretches and knocks a blanket askew. Chickens cluck softly, moving toward the warmth of the hearth. You adjust each in turn, mindful that their body heat contributes significantly to the overall temperature of the room. Every action is deliberate. Each small decision, where to place a brick, how to fold a blanket, how to tuck in a shawl, adds up to survival. The room is a delicate ecosystem, a balance of warmth, movement, and vigilance. Breakfast follows. The stew, simmered overnight, is thickened and slightly more palatable than yesterday. Bread is sliced sparingly, distributed evenly among the family. A small mug of warmed ale goes around, enough to give each person a temporary sensation of warmth and comfort. You watch everyone eat quietly, understanding that even this small ritual is part of the larger strategy: nourishment to maintain body heat, fuel to keep limbs functional, and morale to preserve the will to endure winter's long days. The chores extend beyond the room. Snow must be cleared from pathways, water brought in from partially frozen streams, and firewood prepared for the coming night. You bundle up in layers, adjusting your cap and wraps to minimize heat loss. Every step outside is a careful negotiation with the cold. The body shivering, breath curling in clouds, feet crunching over frost-hardened ground. Survival is not passive. It requires constant movement, strategy, and awareness. By midday, the house has settled into a fragile rhythm. The fire burns steadily, the animals are positioned optimally for warmth, and the family rests or performs quiet chores. You reflect on the strategies that make this survival possible: shared body heat, layered clothing, warmed bricks, insulated bedding, attentive care of animals, small rituals, and superstition. Each contributes to a tapestry of endurance carefully maintained over generations. Even as you rest, the knowledge persists. Winter is long, relentless, and unforgiving. But every night survived, every chore completed, every small victory over frost and hunger builds resilience. You recognize the extraordinary effort embedded in what seems ordinary: breathing in rhythm with the fire, adjusting a blanket to trap heat, rotating bricks for warmth, checking on the smallest sibling, and ensuring that every living thing under the roof remains protected. In this moment, you feel the full weight and value of these practices. Warmth, once taken for granted in stories of noble households or distant lands, is here something tangible, earned through effort, vigilance, and care. Survival through winter isn't about comfort, it's about calculation, observation, and consistent action. Each night is a battle won, each morning a testament to human ingenuity, persistence, and resilience. Historical fact: peasant families in medieval Europe relied on careful coordination of fire, bedding, animals, and clothing to survive harsh winters, emphasizing communal strategies over individual comfort. Quirky fringe fact: some households use small heated tran pans or bricks to pre-warm beds, and even rotated livestock indoors to maximize body heat, a practical and slightly chaotic method of survival. Debate spotlight: scholars continue to discuss the efficiency and prevalence of winter survival strategies among medieval peasants, with some arguing that ingenuity and communal effort were critical, while others suggest that luck and local resources played a larger role. And so, as the sun rises higher and the day stretches on, you finally allow yourself a moment to breathe. The cold hasn't vanished, of course. It never fully does in winter, but the immediate threats have been managed. The fire burns steadily, radiating warmth into the room. Bricks, strategically rotated, hold residual heat in the blankets. Animals are positioned near the hearth or on carefully arranged straw, each contributing their own body warmth to the delicate ecosystem you've maintained through the night. It's a fragile balance, but for now, it works. You lean back, taking in the quiet triumph of surviving another long, bitter night. You think of the layers of wool, the patched blankets, the warming bricks, and the herbs tucked carefully among the straw. Each element represents ingenuity, adaptation, and the wisdom passed down through generations. You think of how families in the medieval world, without modern heating, without central furnaces or insulated homes, crafted survival strategies that were equal parts practicality and ritual. Warmth was never guaranteed. It had to be earned, maintained, and protected. And you've done that. Every adjustment, every precaution, every small act of vigilance has contributed to the continuation of life within these walls. Even superstition has its place. The charms under pillows, the herbs hung over the beds, the iron trinkets carefully positioned near sleeping areas. These rituals may have been symbolic, psychological, or perhaps even practical in subtle ways. They remind you that survival isn't only physical, it is mental, emotional, and sometimes spiritual. Every precaution, rational or mystical, becomes a thread in the fabric of endurance. The cold may be a relentless opponent, but it cannot outmatch preparation, awareness, and care. As the family moves about their morning chores, stoking fires, feeding animals, distributing the meagre meal, you realize that these routines, repeated daily, are the backbone of life in winter. Every ember, every layer of clothing, every shared blanket, every watchful eye contributes to a rhythm that transforms a hostile season into a manageable one. Survival is built one thoughtful act at a time, and when you reflect on the effort, a sense of quiet pride settles in. Winter is long, nights are bitter. Frost creeps in through every crack. Hunger gnaws and illness lurks. But you endure, you adapt, you thrive, not because winter is gentle, but because you have mastered its challenges, understood its rhythms, and embraced its lessons. And as you sit back, warmed by shared heat and careful preparation, you realize that surviving the coldest nights is more than a physical struggle. It is a testament to human resilience, ingenuity, and the quiet power of communal care.